The prophecy says that a child with hair color like a saint will become a princess. He or she will be born special. This man will bring tranquility and peace to the empire, intending to keep everyone healthy and prosperous. The saint was also someone who was special. She healed thousands of people, and with a single word she stopped a bloody war that had been going on for years. The king proclaimed her the savior and protector of the empire. She realized that someone would definitely inherit her abilities. The main character's name is Ura Pantri. She is the girl who was the heiress and princess to keep the balance. The first saint who helped the emperor build an empire wore pink hair. Pink was the main color in the temple. Eventually, a prophecy appeared in the castle that shone brightly, urging the others to open it and read the contents. All people, even those who were not empowered, understood its meaning. It was easy, yet no one thought such a thing could be possible. The emperor didn't realize at the time what he should do. Calling a meeting, he looked around at the people and tried to figure out the girl with the pink hair. It seems that such a person didn't even exist in the empire, despite the fact that the book clearly stated that he would appear. There were more and more rumors floating around the castle, and then also a million questions about what was worth doing. In the end, there was a protagonist who fit exactly the description of what the prophecy said. Her hair was the main sign. Her parents didn't immediately understand what to make of such a mysterious appearance, but over time they just accepted it for what it was. Unlike the parents, the child had pink hair that stood out brightly. The hue made it clear that there was a saint involved. The little girl grew up healthy, but as soon as she turned 5, she was already assigned to the royal throne, predicting the future. The people around them preyed on the girl, saying that she would be the next saint, or at least the new empress sitting on the throne. To top it all off, the damsel was the daughter of a duke. She was the kind of kid who is active and always on her best behavior. Because of the prophecy and the rumors, naturally, everyone around them intended to get close to the little girl, who had no suspicion of her importance. Ura grew up an outgoing and talkative child. She talked so much with the others that her mouth seemed unable to open anymore due to fatigue. The girl was taken to the imperial citadel to test her abilities and then sent further up the career ladder. However, things were much better than they seemed at first glance. The girl knew it was going to be difficult, but she made it through. Sadness enveloped her body, but she knew she couldn't afford to cry, even though the tears were ready to pour out. Things got easier and better because the castle had one special occupant. He was friendly and loving, remaining in need of friends. The little girl was happy about this outcome, but still worried because she lived in a citadel far away from her home and family. The prince became the one ray of light that brought joy into the princess's life. She was willing to do anything for him. Perhaps it was because of a friend that the damsel got serious about her studies. She realized that this was something that would be needed in the future, and something that could not be neglected. At such a young age, it was quite difficult for a girl to prepare for something so responsible. She stayed up nights just to get everything done. Often, right in the middle of the night, there was blood coming out of Beauty's nose, which dripped scarlet drops onto the pages of the textbook. Wiping her nose, the girl was only distracted from her occupation for a few seconds to focus again. She was bound to be a princess. Sometimes Ura wanted to give up her current life. She felt tired of the never-ending stream of people and tasks at hand. The heroine really could no longer withstand such pressure, but she could not let down her only friend, who was always there for her. Next to the prince, Pantri felt the happiest, which was evident to everyone around her, without exception. Staying by the brunette's side, the maiden realized that she could move on and continue to fight for happiness. However, everything changed abruptly. It was as if they had decided to play a joke on the maiden, even though the joke was not funny or amusing at all. The man who came from the temple made the world turn upside down. The prophecy had somehow magically changed. Not understanding how this happened, the girl asks why it changed, to which she is not immediately answered to the question posed. Trying to hold back tears and nervousness, the heroine tries to deny what has happened to her. It seemed like the man was just kidding. Tiredly leaning on his arm, the monk assures that everything will be fine, but even he doesn't know what to say, because everything happened too suddenly. The blonde, frozen, looks at the interlocutor who sits across from her. Her eyes only express the pain that has accumulated over the past few hours. Everything she has been told is the impossible untruth that it is. She didn't want to believe what had just been said because life was just starting to get better. Even so, the prince will never abandon his friend and lover no matter what. That was the belief that was forming in my head. Rising from her chair and swinging the door open, Her Highness rushes out into the street, slamming the sashes behind her to evaporate. Heading forward down the corridor, the maiden tried only to think of one thing. She hoped the young man would never give up his friend in his life. Already being almost outside her office, the princess stops. She hears a voice calling her closer to her. The girl is instantly illuminated with light, and a silly smile appears on her face that could not have been caused by anyone but her lover. The prince is standing at the other end of the hallway, on the stairs that lead upward. He looks at the maiden, talking about how he would like to break the engagement before it's too late. Amber eyes gleam with a dangerous light somewhere in the darkness. A quiet voice with a note of frustration asks the man what the reason is. Turning to His Majesty, the damsel tries to get as close as possible, but the guy seemed to not want any contact. Folding his arms across his chest, the man says in a menacing voice that he is sorry. That's not true, of course, because you can see the joy in the look. My head sinks down because there is no more strength to go forward. I can't believe the couple can't be together anymore, as she had hoped for it until the last. The girl loved the guy, but now all she had to do was nervously clutch her wrist with her hand to keep from starting to scream, venting her anger. A memory pops into my mind, in which the prince smiles welcomingly as he extends his hand to his new friend. Then the young man was incredibly gentle, trying to let the princess get used to the new realities of her life. She was new to the castle. The girl tries to get the prince to remember how it used to be. With effort, they can rebuild everything and make it stay together. The prince doesn't seem to express his emotions in any way. He stands in the same spot, frowning. With no intention of making contact, he turns away. You can see the desperation in the heroine's eyes. Her only loved one almost disowns her, forcing her to become someone else. The words which the Empress had been so afraid to hear were spoken. The pair are no longer bound by the prophecy between them. What happened is beyond anything possible. There is no choice anyway, so the heroine, sighing heavily, clutches her dress with her hands. Azriel is well aware of the need to try to preserve at least the remnants of the prophecy. They've been together for 18 years, and the young man just leaves his future wife like that. Virgo becomes some kind of garbage that is so easily thrown away. She quietly goes along with what she's told because she's not going to hold on to the past. Not daring to utter another word, she abruptly turns around only to leave the room as quickly as possible. It was on such a note that the beautiful relationship between the lovers ended. The wedding was only 1 month away. It was morning outside, but even though the sun was shining brightly, the heroine could not open her eyes and get out of bed. As time went on, it got easier. Opening her eyes, the girl looks around. Complete silence is now a constant guest in the room. Getting out of bed, the girl realizes she is never around. Everything became clear with the groom yesterday, but today even her faithful servants abandoned her. My hands reach for the crown that lies on the nightstand next to the bed. The stone seems less bright than before, as if trying to remind me of what happened. A sad look examines the thing. The girl won't need her anymore, for the prophecy back will never change again. Sitting down on a chair near the table, the beauty examines the tiara, which has been pushed aside. All that's left is to regret the past. Sounds and voices of guards are heard outside the door, asking someone not to enter the room without permission. Wiping away her tears, the maiden gets up to go outside. The door swings open with a full swing, before Azriel can even follow into the hallway, which seems too ignorant. Throwing on a robe that is more suited to looking pretty, the blonde follows forward, trying to figure out what's going on there. A short figure appears in the passage. Because of the shadows that fall skillfully on the body, it is impossible to see the face. The middle-aged girl smiles a not entirely welcoming smile, pretending to be pleased to make her acquaintance. Her hair is also pink in color. It seems like every girl dreams of being a princess. It can't be changed because that's the way it's been done for centuries. Still smiling, the maiden's eyes sparkle. She greets the heroine again in order to bring the heroine out of her trance. The girl introduces herself as Navia. According to her, she is the one who must fulfill the prophecy of the saint who helped the emperor. Frowning, the princess looks at the arrival. It is the daughter of the Marquis of Lurtella, but such a thing makes no sense. Realizing that the maiden has frozen, the girl waves her hand in order to attract the attention of the interlocutor. She calls that one by name. Lady Pantri fixes her hair, saying that she is here, but has no recollection of giving permission to enter the chambers. The little girl looks around in surprise. She doesn't look like someone who regrets anything. Navia looks around interestedly and then heads over to the table, completely ignoring questions about what she wants here. Picking up the tiara, which seems too light, the girl, as if nothing had happened, talks about having come to look around. She's gonna live here now. Picking up the item, Lurtella puts it on her head in order to get a feel for her power, or how things will go from here. Smiling, the little girl seemed to glow with joy. She asks if such a gift from the Emperor suits her. The heroine can't accept the fact that her place will be taken by some insufferable little girl who doesn't even know what she should do and how exactly to do it. The guard who burst into the room orders the maiden to leave the room. She is not allowed to come in here, but she will be a princess very soon. Deciding it's time to intervene, Azriel walks closer to the miss, calling out to her to get her attention. Pretending that she doesn't understand, the blonde mockingly asks what's wrong. She thought no one would do anything to her. The prophecy has indeed changed, so very soon the room will be hers. But until that moment has come, it turns out that the lady has entered the territory of others completely illegally. The act is considered a sin, so punishment can be devised. Trying to object, Lurtella steps back. She repeats again about what the prophecy says about her, which means she will be a princess very soon. Tired of this unbearable behavior, the girl sighs heavily to finally teach the maiden some sense. The girl is only the daughter of the Marquis, while Sia is still a full-fledged princess. With those words, it becomes clearer. Faltering, the girl flaps her eyes. She didn't know anyone would answer her in such a tone when how she thought she was the best. The maiden is still the prince's bride, and also the mistress of the citadel. The emperor himself has decided that things stay as they are for now, and she's a nobody here for now. Freezing, the blonde tries to find the right words. Not expecting the pushback she was being given for the first time in her life, the heroine was frightened. Perhaps it's because the young lady is the daughter of an oracle. She considers herself superior to the emperor himself, which seems unforgivable. Bouncing aside, the maiden shouts fearfully that it's all nonsense. She can't let that happen. The crown falls to the tiles with a loud pop, hitting the hardness and nearly shattering. The gold is crumbling around the edges. Pointing her finger at the girl, Pysantria asks the guards to grab Navia. They should tie her up hand and foot and then hand her back to the Marquis. The maids who have been crowded near the entrance to the room begin to whisper amongst themselves. The maiden doesn't regret anything, as she thinks that this would be a pretty normal punishment for Navia breaking into the princess's bedroom. The guards nod in agreement, approaching the girl who tries with all her might to resist. She screams about this being her room. The heroine is taken out of the room while the screaming continues unabated. She complains about the treatment, which is so horrible. The blonde stares menacingly into the distance. It's hard not to realize that the truth is that she'll soon be a nobody, but not at this point, it's not that bad. Walking back into the room, the maiden carefully takes a seat on one of the couches near the window to rest. It is too foolish of His Majesty to replace Urja with some unintelligent child. She can't become like a princess. Not knowing what to do next, the maiden lowers her face into the palms of her hands. She should think about her plan for the next few days. We need to make the people in the castle pay for everything they have already done and are going to do in the future. A new day meant that it was time for the heroine to go about her usual business in the obligatory matching outfit. As she walks past one of the columns, the Empress hears voices saying that a god has turned away from her. Two middle-aged girls are discussing the girl. They had no other explanation as to why the prophecy had changed. No one knows what's next for the Pysantria family. Their daughter has been turned away by a god, however, since she is a princess. It is likely she will be given away to another king. The interlocutor, laughing, says that no one else wants the maiden. There is no limit to the outrage because no one dares to say such a thing. Stepping forward, the heroine glares menacingly at the girls. She asks them to repeat what they just said. The maidens try to move as far away as possible to avoid getting hit by the wave of the princess's wrath. All that's left is to regret what I said. Vigorously bowing their heads down and almost falling on their knees, the beauties ask for forgiveness because, according to them, they are very, very sorry for what happened. The blonde assures that they will never, ever hear something like that from her again. Humming, the girl notes the truthfulness of some of the words. She is no longer the crown princess, which makes the hopelessness of the situation clear. Those standing opposite continue to bow fiercely in order to be forgiven and released to their chambers as soon as possible. A voice from behind calls out to Her Highness and then asks what happened there. There's no mistaking the man for anyone else. The maid of honor was the one who arrived as soon as she smelled something amiss going on in the girls who had managed to talk nonsense. The indifferent gaze of the blue-haired woman shifts to the former empress. Looking into the eyes of the heroine, she tries to convey all the pain that has been accumulating somewhere inside her all this time. The heroine seems to have become just like everyone else. She had stayed with the girl since she was a little girl, but now she had turned away. A nervous laugh bursts out of my chest. Betrayal is always the worst thing that can happen, so the maiden turns around to leave. The heroine had been acquainted with those who said something like that for years, but now things were mercilessly falling apart. That's exactly how it ended, even if the maiden didn't want the people she loved so much to turn their backs on her. The guard obligingly opens the door to the main hall for the former mistress. So far, it's the only one that's obeyed. Once inside, the first thing the heroine does is look around the room. She's not as interested in cooked food. Sitting at the table is someone who just yesterday gave up his beloved simply at the snap of a finger, despite all that was between them. Urja sighed sadly. She can't believe that she can only meet the prince in the reception hall now. They are no longer family, so bowing, the maiden asks if she kept His Highness waiting. Except that very little time had managed to pass, so it wasn't the worst problem that had happened. Inviting the princess to sit down, the man points to a vacant seat directly across from him. There's already a cup of tea standing there. The maiden was too accustomed to seeing the prince every day that she began to take for granted. Now everything's changed. The heroine could never have predicted such a strange outcome for herself and the boyfriend. As luck would have it, moments with memories that were too precious to the girl came to mind. At first, the couple were just young children, but then as time went on, they grew up but also continued to spend time together. I couldn't believe it was just over like that. She will never again feel the warmth of a guy from the hugs she gets. Maiden had something to say. She learned that by inheritance the place of chief chamberlain at the castle had been taken by the son of the former owner. Frowning his eyebrows, the young man sighed. The girl doesn't seem to care at all about what happened, judging by her reaction. Not understanding what was wanted of her, the blonde asks if they wanted her to protest. If tears solved anything, perhaps Sia would have cried. It wasn't the best thing to do, so the maiden just decided to keep the remnants of her pride intact. The guy's hand clenches in hers, which is perfectly visible. The heroine didn't come here just for the news. The interlocutor was right. She definitely had something to say before leaving the reception area and walking off into the sunset. Looking somewhere in her teacup, Pysantria asks when she should leave the imperial palace. The logical chain was not difficult to construct at all. His Highness didn't say anything, so it will most likely be up to the prince to decide. Looking menacingly at the girl and lowering his voice, the young man asks if she really wants to leave. He seems to need the heroine to stick around. Total silence is something to ponder. The girl slowly sips, some more tea from the mug. Realizing that no answer will be forthcoming, the brunette leaves the room, telling her friend that she can do as her soul desires. The scornful look should have gone to the guy who had already managed to leave, yet remains alone with his hostess. Outside, night had fallen, which covered the sky with a dark blanket. The heroine stands in her room in front of a candlestick. The heroine had collected a great many useful notes, which of course she was going to give to the young man. In the end, she was just trying for nothing. Memories of the girl practicing with a sword somewhere in the castle's backyard 8 years ago came to mind. Fatigue prevented normal continuation, so the maiden would stop to catch her breath and start again. The guy who was usually busy with other things comes closer, calling out to Ursia, who immediately looks around. He asks the one not to force herself if she can't. The emperor said that members of the imperial family should be able to stand up for themselves. Interrupting his friend, the boy talks about how he is a pretty good knight who handles combat better than the state. A hand reaches out to the girl, who is still holding the wooden sword, to continue practicing. Accepting the weapon, the young man asks if the princess will allow him to defend her and her honor. Then the blonde was covered in scarlet paint, for she hadn't even hoped to ever receive such an offer. Lowering her gaze, the little girl thanks. He's good at everything, but he still tries to cheer the girl up. They would go through life together, so the hero was sure that he would always be able to protect the heroine. Now everything once said seems like nonsense or a lie that was planned in advance as a not-so-good joke. By holding the pages up to the candles, the maiden allows them to consume the pages into the fire, which ignites almost instantly. After a few seconds, there was almost nothing left of the sheets of notes. The text disappears behind the tongues of fire that eat it up. The ashes that were left of all that was, the maiden is going to scatter in the air. Walking over to the open window, she lets it go into the distance. Something in the distance catches the attention that has been occupied by something else all this time. Turning, the maiden looks forward. Under the moon, a bird rushes forward, swiftly approaching the windowsill, hoping to make it in time. A skinny hand reaches forward to snag a piece of paper tied to the animal's leg. The baby sinks down on the toe that has been extended forward. He's scrambling over his paws, waiting to be given something to eat. Accepting the note with the dark inked text left in it, the heroine unfolds the scrap of paper. The face immediately reflects joy and calmness. The message was from a father who must have been nervous and anxious about his daughter's future. Lowering herself into the chair where the girl had been only moments ago, she bows her head in anticipation. The door slowly opened, letting me know that the wait, as usual, wasn't very long. Smiling, the blonde waved hello as befits high society. They hadn't seen each other for quite some time. The man leans in. His name is Ash, the same loyal servant of the Duke family who was sent here without his father's knowledge. The guy lifts his head, looking with his violet eyes straight into his soul, in order to read what is there. It's about the blade, so Ursia immediately invites the young man to come into the room, rather than stand in the passage. Standing almost next to the heroine's chair, the man talks about how he's been waiting a very long time to finally be summoned to his place. Dropping to one knee, the hero makes it clear that he is still as loyal to his masters, no matter what. Extending his hand, the man calls out to Her Highness, as if hoping that she would accept immediately after the offer. Taking the neat palm in his hands, Ash gently kisses the backside, trying to do it as quickly as possible. Raising his head, he looks into his eyes, asking if there's anything he can do to help since he's already been summoned to the Imperial Palace. Leaning closer to the man, the maiden speaks of having one request. He will have to spread one rumor. It's about Lady Lurtella, whom the Empress still holds a grudge against. She didn't like the girl's behavior at all. As you know, the Marquis has no money or influence besides his title. Nothing will help him anymore, even if he tries to get through. The whole series of failures happened because a man 3 generations ago allowed his wife to use weak people to stay beautiful. Right now, the princess could play perfectly on what they were about to do. Ash had to help. First, we need to spread the rumor that Lurtel's daughter is kidnapping beggar children. That's enough for now, but eventually a second wave will be needed. By asking for the servant's opinion, the maiden gets what she wished to hear. Miss Navia was the one who first started such a war. The girl even talked about the heroine being too wasteful because she manipulates the servants. It's more like baby talk. The man bows his head. He won't allow the girl to be insulted by anyone, so he'll do his best. Tears appear in the guy's eyes, which are not immediately an understandable phenomenon to the heroine, who observes it closely. The princess gets the gist of the performance. The servant wants to be told off for something, and he pretended to be offended. You have to do exactly what you're supposed to do, or others might suspect something amiss with the guy coming in. It's very convenient when you can cry the moment you want to, so the lady lets Ash go, from whom she expected nothing less. The sheet with the written plan is back near the candles, just like the others. It'll all make sense now. The maiden will make you feel sorry for Navia, for she got in the way of the only princess of Pysantria, making the latter feel bad. The morning, as usual, was too bright because of the sun that had gone down. A man with silver hair approaching the castle stops to greet his enlightenment, head bowed, while the guy talks about the latest news. The princess has found herself at the center of a new scandal. Smiling, the young man notes that he cannot allow anything like that, because Pysantra must belong to him alone. The servant opposite tries to object to something, but he is not allowed to utter even a single word. Also involved in this incident is Miss Lurtella, who is the new owner of the prophecy in the castle. Bursting into laughter, the young man incredibly startles the butler, who must have thought he was out of order. The young man didn't seem to have missed anything, which meant it was a ploy the princess used to stay last. Lady Pysantria was definitely an interesting person. Some of her actions defied logic, but showed exactly how beautiful she was. The guy was going to meet the lady directly, just as he had planned. His list of things to do was impeccable. The image of a beautiful girl pops into my mind. He can't wait until they get to meet. The room was empty, as if no one had ever lived there. A girl stands in the middle of the room with a suitcase next to her. The princess had no desire to stay in the palace after what had happened. The decision was to return to his father. We need to keep what belongs to the palace. The only snag was the engagement ring, which also belonged to others. Not daring to take on the task herself, the beauty grabs the bell and rings it to summon the maid. The maid appears after the first call. She bows her head, asking what Her Highness needed. Examining the woman, the maiden recognizes that she has never seen her before. Looks like the prince changed all the servants after the breakup. The maiden calls out to the princess, to which she quickly apologizes. There are too many thoughts lately to keep my mind at rest. Bringing a box wrapped in red velvet, Azriel asks the maid to give it directly to the prince. The door slams shut after the maiden leaves the chambers, and the heroine is left completely alone again. Next, the maiden has to get rid of some clothes she absolutely does not need, so she turns to the closet. It's worth choosing which dresses to get rid of, and which ones to take with you. Sitting down on the bed where the clothes are already laid out, the beauty admits to herself that she wants to throw away everything that was bought with the prince. There's another knock at the door, which interrupts Azriel from the class she's been putting off for the second day. The young lady orders her to enter the chambers, and as soon as the door opens, she sees, of course, the very same maid who had entered earlier. Holding out the box back, the girl relays the prince's words. He asked his wife to return the ring herself. Obviously, the guy just decided to mess around since he's asking to personally bring something that no longer belongs to Azriel. This ring was given when the couple was no more than 16 years old. At least it meant something then. The only thing that comes to mind is how happy the girl was when she got what she had wanted for so long. Humming, the Empress realizes that she is willing to accept the rules of this game. She accepts the box back. The voice of a servant who, turning to Her Highness, asks if she is all right, pulls her out of her thoughts. Glancing at the brunette, the maiden realizes that she is saying this quite sincerely. She's scared and worried. A maiden is not allowed to ask such questions, but she couldn't help but do so. She's worried about the princess's condition. The blonde wasn't going to scold the maid just for some question, even if it hurt. There are terrible rumors about the Marquis of Lurtella's daughter. According to the lady, it's even scary to imagine what would happen if she was a crown princess. Looking directly into her eyes, but letting her finish her sentence, the girl asks what the maid's name is. The brunette freezes, clearly not expecting such a question. She looks directly at the lady, who seems quite confident. Bowing her head, the maiden hurries as fast as she can to answer. Her name is Azriel Portuba. She is the daughter of Viscount Portuba, who is as well known in tight circles, even to the princess. The girl can still come in handy and serve well, even if she seems incredibly scared right now. Turning around, the Empress exits, where she is immediately met by several servants who bow their heads. The prince is announced that Her Highness Princess Pizantria has arrived. It didn't take her long. The girl came as the future emperor wanted. He must have called the pretty girl in to taunt her. Walking on, the maiden stops somewhere near the tables. She lowers her head. Looking at the table, Belle notices a vase that still held beautiful flowers. I couldn't believe the bouquet was left in the office. Once before, Azriel herself had composed it of light-colored flowers. It had been a long time ago, but perhaps the prince had simply thrown away the old one and brought a similar one to replace the loss. Approaching from behind the chair, the man quietly asks if his former lover has come to return his ring. What the princess had come for seemed quite obvious. She wouldn't want to be in the office for another reason. That's what the maiden came for. Taking the box out of her pocket and holding it out to the side, she remains calm. The guy stares silently at the outstretched object he has offered to accept. The girl was handed what the young man was asking for back, the ring personally, and since it was his will, it was worth carrying out. Saying nothing, the man merely nods. He quickly grabs the box and takes it from the princess's palm. It's a good thing the ring is still intact. His Highness has nothing more to say, so the maiden is about to leave. The girl didn't watch her movements, so she completely accidentally knocked over a vase of flowers. The thing flies swiftly to the ground before colliding with it and shattering into a million small pieces. The blonde looks tiredly at what she has done. There's no mood at all, so even the smallest thing is incredibly annoying. Lifting the hem of her dress so as not to soil anything, the heroine examines a puddle of water. The prince calls out to Sia, ordering her not to move, for it could be dangerous. He grasps the lady's hand. Bouncing aside, the lady reminds him that they are no longer engaged, so being so close is forbidden. Turning away, the young man steps aside more quickly. Virgo, of course, is right as usual, for all she cares about is reputation and norms. Without looking back at her lover again, the maiden says goodbye, indicating that she is about to leave. The guy thought that the girl has no other activities, but it seems that he was wrong because she is always trying to go somewhere. In fact, the lady has a lot on her plate. She hasn't lived here for a long time, so it's going to be quite a challenge to pack everything up. Turning abruptly, the brunette asks his interlocutor the same thing she just said, as if in disbelief. In a split second, the young man is back next to the blonde, who takes a step back to keep out of harm's way. She realizes exactly what she is saying. However, it is true that the heroine is about to leave. It's impossible to stay in a place you hate. About to leave, the maiden is stopped again. A hand grabs her wrist to temporarily stop the familiar. Pulling Ursula closer, the guy tries to strike up a conversation but doesn't know where to start, seeing the menacing look on her face. Lowering her head, the brunette asks about what she's going to do next. He has a favor to ask. Looking straight into the young man's eyes, the maiden asks him what it was that he wanted to say. You can tell from her that there's no joy here. The guy asks for help sorting through the mountain of documents that has managed to accumulate recently. The princess has been doing it all along. Next, instead of insisting, the hero abruptly lets go of the heroine's hand so she can move farther away. Stuttering, the brunette asks to forget what he just said. He seems very eager to get away. Turning away, he announces that nothing is needed, which means the heroine can finally be free. Virgo isn't even going to say or object to anything. She turns around, nodding her head in agreement. Picking up the hem of her dress, the lady leaves the prince's chambers, hoping she can get to her room as quickly as possible. Stepping out into the hallway, the heroine looks around. This castle she considered her home because she had lived here since she was almost 5 years old. Perfectly realizing that if you leave, you won't be able to come back here again, the girl was still ready for such a step. There is complete silence in the office, which allows the girl to relax a little, leaning back in her chair. Attention is drawn to a sound outside the door. Someone knocked only twice, which made it clear who was standing there. Allowing the maiden to enter, the heroine watches as a servant girl appears in the room and bows her head. Rising from her chair, the princess follows forward. The maid obligingly inquires about what was wanted from her. Turning her attention somewhere downward, the brunette freezes with a splash of terror filling her gaze. The maid focused on the princess's ankle. There's dried blood pooled there. It won't leave a scar, so there's nothing to worry about. Sitting down on the chair again and lifting her leg up, the blonde asks for her ankle to be bandaged. The brunette nods vigorously. She certainly knows how to do such simple manipulations, so she sits down on her lap. Putting her knee under her leg, the girl takes the bandages in her hands and carefully begins to wrap the wounded area. The blonde, head bowed, looks bored at what's going on, showing no interest, just waiting for the procedure to be over. The girl is almost done, however decides to ask if the girl needs a doctor who could be a great help, to which she gets a no. Instead of turning away again, the protagonist smiles for attention. The lady wanted to ask you something. It didn't take long for the maid to react because she only smiles. Laughing lightly so as not to arouse any suspicion, the damsel asks if the maid knows how to keep her ears open. The maiden, on the contrary, stares intently, no longer showing her former interest in her interlocutor. The princess asks for more details about the rumors about Lady Lurtella, since everyone already knew. The maid talks about not being particularly interested in rumors, but a table of cookies and tea sure manages to get the conversation going. The princess lowers herself onto one of the couches in the room, inviting the brunette to take a seat across from her and start the tea party. The maid hadn't heard that much, but she knew for a fact that the girl was kidnapping children from poor families. It has long been common knowledge that the Marquise likes to take bloodbaths. Sipping some tea, the blonde nods. She doesn't have to think about who did it, because Ash did a great job as promised. Thoughts are interrupted, for the interlocutor asks why Her Highness feels so strongly about Lurtella. The brunette can't believe that such a person would be the new princess. Everyone around her, as one, thinks she is unworthy of such a title. The blonde nods. She had heard something like that, so she couldn't help but agree with the rumors. The future of the imperial family can't help but worry the girl, who is keenly aware of exactly what will happen to them all. Changing the subject, the beauty laughs lightly, offering to talk about the maid instead of talking about Navia. Asking about Mr. Rubella, the girl wonders if Azriel knows him, to which she says he is her brother. The princess, of course, knows the guy a little bit, since he's the prince's assistant in the cabinet. Smiling, the brunette seems to light up with renewed energy and joy. She's glad her brother has such a fate, as they get along so well. The man had to answer what it was like to feud with Ursula. It was all the prince's fault. Outside, evening had come, which brought the stars with it. Turning to the window, the lady notices a bird right on the windowsill. Perhaps it was another message from his father, but the bird didn't look like anything familiar. Opening the window, the lady invites the bird inside, holding out her hand for it to land. Accepting the message, the maiden unfolds the letter with surprise, noticing that it is just a blank sheet that has no meaning. There was nothing so important or secret in the message, yet it still confused the princess. The lady was going to paper here as well as anything else she ever got her hands on. It's already become her new tradition. Bringing the sheet to the fire, the maiden notices the text that begins to slowly reveal itself almost instantly. Frozen, the beauty concentrates on what is written there, not immediately realizing why this is the case. Clutching the paper, the heroine tosses it aside menacingly. Such shenanigans were very sneaky and certainly made a difference. The heroine had never held anything heavier than a cup in her life, but now for some reason she was being accused of something that wasn't true. Niella swears on her name and the honor of the empire that the family will always take care of her people. We should believe the oracle's daughter, not silly rumors. Ash, who had just arrived with the letter, obligingly bows as usual before reporting the situation. This is the way the new princess decided to fight the rumors. She just absolutely had to dispel the untruth. Sighing, the blonde looks away. Baby didn't see any boundaries, so she acted like she was already a princess. The girl had no right to swear on the honor of the empire, so this gave a new reason to be angry. Maiden asks Ash for one more favor. The man was of course going to perform everything to the best of his ability, so the lady simply retired to her chambers. Accepting a leaf that had arrived recently via messenger pigeon, the maiden scrutinizes the contents. The girl hadn't expected anything else from her father, but she was Pysantria after all, so she wasn't going to take back her words. A plan forms in my head. The heroine asks her father to somehow block the road because she needs to stay in the castle longer in order to gather more information about the Marquise's family. Everything is once again going as well as possible and exactly according to plan. The butler who arrives reports that everything went fine, but that the trip will have to be postponed due to the collapse. Pretending not to understand, the blonde flaps her eyes in surprise, asking what kind of collapse we're even talking about. As it turns out, the only road leading to the duchy is simply blocked, preventing the carriage from passing. It seems unrealistic that this just happened because the heroine asked her father to look into it just a day ago. The maids standing outside are listening intently to the conversation that has been going on for decades. The handle is broken, so it's as if the door opens periodically on its own, allowing everyone to listen. In the morning, the heroine broke her pen to see how things would go from here. There was to be absolutely nothing in the way of her plan. Things were going as well as they could, so all that was left was to continue playing by the rules the princess had laid out. Humming, the maiden assures that nothing terrible has happened, however. She is now completely unsure of what to do with Lurtella. She lives in the castle, and is now the wrong person to stay with the Marquis. All that remains is to guard against what may happen to the other inhabitants of the castle. The girl ran to the princess and ordered her to get out of the capital immediately. Nothing stops her from doing the same to the others. Clenching his hands behind his back so as not to say anything unnecessary, the man only agrees. Someone who can't even write can't lead an empire. Navia couldn't even defend her state. The little girl doesn't have a penny behind her back because she's completely maintained by the temple. She spends all her money on dresses and jewelry. The man switches to a menacing shout, saying that such a thing is completely inexcusable. It's true. Someone like the Marquis's daughter doesn't know how to manage funds or help the temple when it will need something. The crown princess has to behave a little differently. That's not the way it's going to work, and probably everyone around here will agree with it too. The rumor spread even faster than the maiden thought it would, because it had all happened just a few days ago. The girl extends her palm to the one who has arrived and shakes it, a sign that all will be well with both her and the empire. The blonde will always take care of her subordinates, so the butler assures her that he will always be at Ursa's side. The man assures that one word from the princess and he will be willing to risk his life to stop Lurtella. His son will do the same. The man still remembers the very day the blonde was brought to the castle for further training to break up the prophecy. Things are different now. The heroine grew up and changed, but remained the same kind and pure soul who wanted to help no matter what. Because of what happened, Her Highness's visit and departure will be postponed to allow time to recover from what happened. The girl looks at the sun, which is reflected on the door. I would like to see the rumors continue to spread. A smile breaks across the face of the heroine herself, who knows that the girl will definitely not be able to dignify her response this time. Lurtella is just a spoiled brat who is stepping on the same rake more than once, which seems ridiculous. Even the emperor didn't dare touch the sword, shield, and treasure of the empire. He just couldn't allow such a thing to happen. This all was exactly the one and only princess of Pysantria. She was the most valuable thing to everyone around in the castle and in the people. Ura Pantri was and still is an important piece on the chessboard, capable of doing anything. The beauty managed the groups of pieces on the board very skillfully, as if it was something she wanted to do all her life. Her rival had been spending the temple's hard-earned money on all sorts of trinkets, so now it was worth it to see how she would get out of it. Grinning and looking at the board where one piece has fallen, the damsel realizes that the battle is going to be extremely interesting. The morning came very quietly, so the blonde went to her office to take care of some paperwork. The rumors seemed to be gaining popularity, spreading at a great speed never seen before. In order to get rid of old rumors, you have to start new ones, so such a rule has never failed. Leaning back in her chair, the girl wondered if the temple shouldn't continue to support Navia, because she certainly didn't deserve it. The girl is the daughter of an oracle, so she has been receiving many temple privileges all along. The window swings open and develops long hair in the wind. It seems like someone did it on purpose to mess up the hair. The heroine's languid gaze rises forward. She wasn't thinking of anything but revenge, which wasn't going to keep her waiting long. In the past, high priests did not interfere in worldly affairs, but it was said that the current one was completely different. It is known that the man is still not on the side of the new princess, which means that there remains a chance to poach him and set him on the right path. Miss Lurtella is not supported by the Marquise's fallen family, but the temple is a great influence, for in the people its power is equal to that of the emperor. It is very difficult to counter such abilities and resources, and if this continues, the situation will fall into a blind corner. If Navia continues to dishonor the honor of the temple, then things will change. The oracle would hardly want something like that. Apparently, after all the rumors, that's where the path leads, so all that will remain is to change the priest's mind. If it happens that everything goes according to plan, then it will end quite nicely and definitely in favor of the girl behind the throne. Ura still didn't even know what a high priest was until now. That will be the next task to unravel. A man with snow-white hair turns a corner, swinging his blade. Practice is proceeding as usual. The young man is interrupted by a voice calling out to him. He, in turn, lowers his blade, relaxing a bit. The sparring opponent drops to the ground to rest, while the mentor follows the incoming sparring opponent forward. The letter was delivered from the palace itself, and stated that the Princess Pysantria wished to meet his enlightenment. A sly smile almost immediately appears on the face of the young man who has made his own plan. He knew this would happen. The time for the meeting hasn't come yet, but it looks like Sia is scrutinizing the information she needs, giving herself an account of it. Advancing through the garden, the young lady leads the maid behind her, because today she has a lot of things to do that need to be done in time, as usual. Turning around just a few centimeters, the maiden calls out to Azriel, who looks interestedly into her mistress' eyes. Taking the dark cloak off her shoulders, the maiden holds it out to her acquaintance, for the morning air is quite chilly. Attempting to object, the maiden was interrupted by the princess, who asked in a sweet voice what was wrong, to which she received a negative reply. Azriel was known to have her own role in the plan. She was the older sister of Rubella Portuba, the prince's assistant. There may be help from a brunette that is not usually expected since she is kind. It's worth keeping allies. The girls are in the castle's beautiful garden, which is blooming and fragrant as usual. Roses have always been the most beautiful. Calling out to her friend, the girl hears the address, Your Highness, to which she shakes her head negatively. It's no longer a real status. Turning away, the girl asks not to be taken in by such trivialities that are not so important. She wanted to say that the beautiful girl just called her Princess. The girl's cheeks are covered in bright color while she nods. She feels like she's getting closer to Ura herself. In one of the halls in the garden is one of the most remarkable buildings in the entire kingdom. The glass house impresses the heroine. Smiling, the blonde nods. Only members of certain families can go in there, so it's a great honor. The maiden's brother is His Highness's aide, so their family can't be called ordinary. It's worth coming here more often. Smiling, the brunette nods to quickly agree to what she's being told and not to take too long. The woman looks directly at her interlocutor, who crumples as if about to say something that has been bothering her for a long time. It turns out that Azriel has been unable to find a home for a long time, so she just lives with her brother. Maids usually go home or live at the palace, but hers is different. Bowing her head, the heroine asks interestedly if the maiden really loves Rubella so much, who treats her well. This is true because the brunette can't imagine her life without her brother, who constantly helps her in everything. The smile itself renews itself on his face. The girl has taken the bait, which means now couldn't be a better time. Holding out her hand, the heroine sighs delightedly. It turns out that the maiden has been living away from her family since childhood, so this is commendable. The maiden's hand gets tangled in the brunette's hair, who tries to excuse herself and say it's okay. Looking straight into her eyes, the princess asks about the topics Azriel usually talks about with her brother. Smiling, the girl says she doesn't have time to talk to her brother, which is why she's so interested in hearing about other people's conversations. Belle relates that they usually tell each other how their day went, or when one of them has learned something new. Sometimes they also talk about work, but it is this question that interests the heroine most of all. The fish was hooked, so without a backward glance of conscience, he tells about some dangerous mission his brother was sent on. It must be hard to be a prince's assistant because of the constant problems, so this can't be ruled out. Virgo is aware of the fact that his brother is always idling, and this is not the first time. The other day, the princess saw a man playing chess with another assistant. This seems untrue in Azriel's eyes. She can't believe what she's just been told, because he's always told her that his job is too difficult. The guy lied the whole time. Times he told me how hard it was for him, so much so that he could barely hold on because of the volume of assignments. The man kept saying that some of the responsibilities of the temple had been dumped on him, and that now he didn't even have a single day off. Apparently the guy wants to pretend to cooperate with the temple, but even in the act, they and the empire had a complicated relationship that couldn't be fixed. The question remains about Princess Lurtella, who came for the throne as if from nowhere. Everything needs to be dealt with, because for now the situation is a stalemate. The girl reaches out to Azriel, asking her to calm down. After all, she was joking. The maiden froze in surprise, flapping her eyes as if she had heard an unfunny anecdote, which it was. He and his brother are very close, for it is only the two of them in the palace. The princess knows how hard the young man works. Her friend nods in agreement because she has always been sure of the truth of her brother's words. The blonde is a little worried about a case. Soon her brother will return from the war, and she has absolutely no idea what to say to him. Jumping up from her seat, the brunette asks furiously what she can do to help. Bright lights of joy shine in his eyes. If Azriel steps in and intends to help, then there's absolutely nothing to worry about. This rule was learned long ago. The girl left the hall to go fulfill her duties, leaving the princess all alone with her thoughts. Virgo is ashamed that she only wants to get close to her brother for her own purposes, which are not as pure as they seem. Azriel had even sworn that she wouldn't tell anyone, which meant she intended to keep her word, but this case was going off the deep end. Belle picks up her mug of than to sip some again and finally calm the nerves that have been frayed beyond belief. His Highness was someone the crown princess definitely hadn't expected to see since this morning, after everything that had gathered in her mind. Miss Lurtella appeared beside the prince like a curse, clinging to his elbow and smiling a nasty smile. The heroine watches the couple silently, hoping that whatever they came here for, the performance won't last long. Lowering herself in a curtsy, the blonde asks what the former empress is forgetting here. The girl listens to what she starts to say. It wasn't the first time Maiden had said to be as polite as possible with her, but it looked like I'd have to explain again. His gaze is transferred to His Highness, who stands silently to the side. Belle asks his permission. In fact, it's all fake because the heroine is her own mistress, but outside consent helps a little. Navia doesn't seem to know the rules of etiquette that even a 3-year-old knows. The maiden is not allowed to speak to her without this permission. The heroine cannot consider the interlocutor still a mere daughter of the Marquis. She's no longer a princess, but she's being treated well. It seems to the little girl that they are on the same level, however. She is so stupid that she still can't see the difference. The woman's father is the Duke of Pysantria, so simply by being his daughter the lady is worthy of such treatment. Glaring menacingly at Miss Lurtella, the lady orders her to be silent, or one more word, and she will be bound and taken away again. Everyone around here should be nicer to the future queen. You can't make jokes like that this time, no matter how much you want to. Virgo looks tiredly at the interlocutor, who like a vampire sucks out all the strength to continue fighting. It's quite impossible to understand the prince. He just stands silently on the sidelines and watches his beloved being pelted with mud. The man either tests the girl's fragile patience or just decides to remain neutral, which is strange in his position. Miss Lurtella leaves the princess alone and turns to His Highness, smiling. Running closer, the heroine grabs the guy's forearm and elbow. She finds herself at his side again, just as she was when she came here. Smiling, the little girl suggests leaving the place as soon as possible so as not to spoil her mood for the day. The brunette watches the girl's actions intently. You can tell from his eyes that he's probably not thrilled, but you can't predict actions. Strangely, the girl is somehow too calm after the rumors that started spreading recently throughout the empire. Taking the girl's temperament into consideration, one could understand that just once she felt superior to the princess, she would try to destroy her. It seems the beauty is at odds with the priest, which means it was the truth that was learned. The voice sends Lurtella herself to the castle. The heroine tries to figure out what it is, while the prince pulls his hand away from the little girl, who is in a state of shock. Without giving any more license to say anything at all, the young man again orders Navia to go on alone and just wait in the castle. Bowing in curtsy, the girl promises that they will meet very soon, even if she looks a little discouraged. The man walks forward to stop directly in front of the lady next to the table, letting Lurtella pass in front. Before leaving, the girl turns around to look at the heroine. She only looks haughtily at the departing lady. The maiden's hand visibly clutches the hem of her dress, most likely from anger that is almost impossible to contain anymore, along with the feelings that have surged. The woman takes a seat in a chair and picks up her mug of tea again to take a little sip before she starts talking. The cup drops back down onto the dish, making a tentative clanking sound that cuts your ears a bit. Looking straight into the prince's eyes, the lady asks what he wanted to talk about so badly since he came and stayed with her. The man rises from his seat and leans right next to the face of the maiden, who turns back. The lady is said to have been doing strange things lately. By asking, the girl acts as if she is hearing about something for the first time, even if it is not true. The rumors being talked about are most likely rumors that have been spreading too fast lately, almost at the speed of light. The man asks Ursia to stop. She herself is well aware of exactly what is wrong, but it can't go on. As he rises and reaches out to touch his former lover's face, the prince reminds her that this is not a request, but an order and a warning. The girl should be smart and realize for herself that the acquaintance is just wishing her well, not bad luck that will happen to her later. Brushing aside His Highness's hand, the maiden nods in agreement. She has no choice but to agree to the conditions set. A guy can warn all he wants, and it's no longer up to anyone else. The maiden once loved very much a young boy who was ready to come to her aid and protection. At times when the lady was scared because of rumors and judgments, she always knew she had someone to help her. The friend always called the blonde by name, trying to support the one even if he wasn't capable of much. The little girl loved the brunette for calling her by her first name, also coming up with abbreviations. The girl loved the guy for always lending his hand to make things easier. The boy always held hands with the princess, realizing that this way she would be taken more seriously than before. Now it's all in the past, so the beauty reminds them that the Pantria family will not allow anyone to become their enemy and live in peace. Virgo simply follows the rules of her family, for that is how she was taught by her father and mother who cared. The guy tries to stop Ursia, who is already getting up to leave the garden, from being alone with him. Turning away, the lady asks him not to call her by her name anymore. They're not together anymore, which means there's no need for it. Now for the young man. The maiden will forever be Princess Pantria, who will very soon become a mere nobody. After saying that, it didn't make me feel one bit better. The girl follows the path away from the lane to hide. The beauty moves swiftly on, but the noise of heels behind makes it clear that someone is following her. Most likely the young man is not completely brainless because he waits for the lady to walk into a deserted place to straighten her out. The only person in the stable is the stable boy who takes care of the horses. He's the man who was most likely stalking the maiden. Courage is definitely not something to be taken lightly, especially since the lady knew she wasn't backing down from anything. She pulls a potion jar from her pocket. Turning around, the heroine asks in a menacing voice if her companion is afraid to be all alone with her. The one who followed the princess turned out to be none other than Miss Lurtella. She didn't say everything she thought. The heroine looks into the lady's eyes, asking what she needs, to which the lady, laughing, asks her to listen. Virgo comes in from afar but hits the mark accurately because everything that is said is true. Rumors started flying. It didn't take long for the future princess to realize that they were being dissolved by a rival. Folding her arms across her chest, the lady easily responds by saying that it wasn't her who first started the war between them. It was about the rumors that had also been spread about Ursia. Virgo would never say anything about her. The blonde frowned. She can't believe she missed picking the one who started slinging mud at her. Asking about who did it, the heroine gets only a facile answer in the form of the interlocutor not knowing. Instead of saying anything, the girl opens the jar of blue potion. Smiling, Pysantria offers to show the girl something interesting, something she hasn't seen before and might be interested in. The liquid takes on a purple hue and slowly pours to the ground. If it had been anyone else, the lady would have poured it out on him. A scorched circle forms on the ground, which showed that the contents were more like acid. Miss Lurtella, clearly not in the mood, steps back. She frowns, realizing her luck. If Navia wants to discuss something, the best solution is to just write a letter, which can save a lot of time and nerves. Maiden quietly advises her not to piss her off lest she get in more trouble, but something catches her attention more than words. On her finger is painted the very ring that was given to the princess long ago, and the same one that the girl gave back to the prince. The piece is flaunted on the left ring finger. You don't have to be a wise man to realize what this is all about. The girl has a nasty temper, so of course will not miss an opportunity to bully. She smiles. The prince gave her the very ring she herself had returned to him. The princess must be very sorry, but she doesn't regret anything. Humming, the beauty notes her surprise that someone liked shabby things on principle. If she were Navia, the girl wouldn't be so excited. What happened also has many pitfalls. Looking at the ring again, the heroine tries to justify herself. She's only wearing it temporarily while they make a new one for her. Obviously, the future princess has nothing more to say. That means it's free to stay out of the way. The interlocutor's hand clenched into a fist to try to quiet her anger that was clenching inside. Sighing heavily, the maiden nods her head, not saying another word to strike a decent pose. The girl doesn't know what to say anymore, so she turns around and slowly heads towards the garden exit. The heroine closely follows the movements of her rival so that she does not try anything strange. Stepping aside, the maiden calls out to Ash, who had been around the whole time. They didn't manage to talk until after sunset. Moving closer, the guy asks, "Is it all right, mistress?" He decided to stay behind to oversee everything. The maiden grinned. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to handle her anger and end the princess, but it was all over. The man nods. He wanted to deliver a letter that was waiting to be delivered, so he tried to meet Ursia. Digging in his pocket, the guy tries to find something, then holds out the envelope he needed. The paper said the war was over. It only meant that the soldiers would be back in a week. 3 years ago, the Sepia kingdom asked the empire to send an army to their aid, which was formed. In return, a treaty was signed that they would become loyal vassals of the empire. It was then that Rias Pysantria, Ursia's brother, went to war to defend the state. Rumors spread rather quickly, so the lady knew that the empire had managed to win with almost no losses. What had happened meant only one thing. The boy who had departed with his brother would also return quite soon. A smile spreads across the heroine's lips. She realizes that things will only get better from here than they are now. What happens will be something that can affect the course of the battle and play into the protagonist's hands. It had only been a week, but it was almost excruciatingly unbearable. The girl, as usual, was lying in bed and looking up at the ceiling. The soldiers, as promised, were to arrive the very next day, thus doing their duty. The sun has not risen, so the beauty decides to sleep a little longer. However, in the morning she is surprised at what she sees. Sitting up on the bed, the maiden looks around. The entire bed is thrown with beautiful peony shade flowers. Belle lifts one of the buds to examine it, realizing that it is not poisonous, but left just for pleasure. The Pysantria family places a lot of emphasis on medicine, including poisons, so poisoning the princess won't be easy. The door opens, allowing the figure to walk inside. A male voice asks if the heroine is awake. None other than Alfredo Venezia, the second prince, appeared in the room. He smilingly asks, "Did the maiden like the flowers?" Fixing his hair, the beauty asks in surprise why he did it. She had no idea of this scenario. Without letting the princess say another word, the brunette leans beside the bed, holding out another bouquet of roses. The blonde concentrates on watching all the action in her direction. It doesn't seem absurd. Turning away, Ursia asks why Alfredo has arrived. They weren't due back from the war until tomorrow. Smiling, the prince continues to remain silent. He's just admiring the heroine's morning beauty. Sitting down on the bed next to her, the brunette finally reasons his visit. He just wanted to visit a friend. The young man ran here with all his legs because he had just recently learned that the prophecy had completely changed. Assuring the guy that everything is fine, the maiden nods. There is nothing to worry about, but there are still a few pressing concerns. The boy has grown a lot. It's been 3 years, which means he's 16 years old now. Alfredo is the illegitimate son of the emperor and brother of the prince. Moving back a few inches, the guy picks up on the fact that the acquaintance is right. He's not that little kid anymore. Reaching his arms forward, the brunette clings to the girl's body and hugs her as hard as he can. Sensing the confusion on his friend's face, the boy looks up, asking if she remembers something that happened before the war. The heroine fades her gaze, realizing that she knows exactly what she's talking about. From the very beginning, and from the moment the maiden appeared in the castle, everything changed for Alfredo. The boy was always alone and constantly bored because no one wanted to spend time with him, so he asked the heroine if she was too busy to be with him. Smiling, the girl assured him that everything was fine, asking the young man about what exactly he would like to do. From that very time, this couple became inseparable, because the guy was following his girlfriend like a tail. The princess gently strokes the boy's head. She is proud that he was able to return safe and sound from wherever the queen sent him. Still keeping up with his acquaintance, the young man snuggles even closer. He was very lonely alone without the only person who understood him. Letting go of the lady, the guy pulls back to do the very same manipulation with the flower. When Alfredo was 13, Ercia allowed him to enter her room without permission, so he thought the pact was still in effect. Pulling the flower closer, Venetia carefully tucks her hair behind her ear and inserts the peony into the beauty's hair. Glancing at the maiden, who turns away half-turned, the man quietly asks if she minds. Nodding, the girl changes the subject. It is important for her to know that no one has seen the young man, to which he responds positively. They didn't want any unnecessary trouble. This is a good thing, because even if the heroine separated from the hereditary prince, such rumors she certainly does not need. Calling out to his sister, the brunette tries to get her attention because there are still a few unanswered questions in his head. The guy frowns, then asks if it's true that they really did break up with his brother. Turning around for just a few seconds to look at her interlocutor, the lady nods easily. The young man realizes that it was all pure truth. He couldn't believe it until the very last moment, but it was true. Approaching the girl, the young man calls the girl by name before he begins to speak. He asks if she wants to have breakfast with him. The next step is that the young man bends down and kisses the back of his sister's palm. Responding in kind, Ercia reminds him that the guy still hasn't even greeted him and Her Majesty. They can spend time later, but right now it's worth going to see his father and stepmother, even if it's a little frustrating. Looking sadly at the floor, the guy turns around and heads for the exit. After all, he hasn't changed a bit over the years. Once outside the door, the guy smiles. He realizes that now he will have a chance to prove himself, so he will definitely try his best. Brushing her hair, the heroine walks to the window, behind which a noise can be heard. The squealing and clanking makes it hard to concentrate or rest. The people outside the window are rearranging boxes that keep arriving, adding new ones to their ranks. The servants can't keep up with everything. Most likely, the castle is going to hold a banquet to celebrate the return of the knights who managed to stay unharmed. If a former princess who broke off the engagement shows up at such an event, the reaction of the prince and the new companion will be extremely hilarious. There is silence in the office, as usual, which is broken by Azriel. She arrived to alert the letter. Accepting the paper, the princess thanks the maid, who smiles immediately. She always liked praise from mistress. The heroine slowly unfolded a message that had strange contents. But that wasn't the most important thing at the moment. As expected, the brother returns to the mansion. He's the heir, and there's too much work accumulated for him over the years. The young man will still come to the banquet, but it will be an isolated incident on which the visits will end. A banquet had to be prepared for, even though servants and knights were known to do that. Nodding, the maiden asks if Azriel will get there. She will pass along with her brother, who will of course bring her along. Making an unhappy look, the heroine asks the maiden to help her, because she needs it more than anyone else. Asking what's wrong, the girl gives no time to answer, immediately saying that she is always ready to come to help. The heroine turns away, making a grim face. Azriel is on her knees right away, trying to find out what the hell happened. Already about to talk about Miss Lurtella, the heroine obviously changes the direction of her thoughts, so she asks the maid to forget about it. Clenching her fists, the brunette assures mistress that she can tell her anything, and she will definitely help her. Dropping down next to her, The heroine asks her to just listen to her. There are cats scratching at my soul, so an hour of storytelling could definitely use some time. Bowing down, the princess asks that nothing and no one be told just to keep the conversation private. What the blonde is about to reveal could seriously damage Miss Lurtella's reputation, which seems wrong because Navia has been stalking Ursia. Sitting in her office, the girl thinks about how to deal with her rival. Nothing helps, and even more debt won't change anything. There's no point, so the woman just calls Ash, who should have already figured out what will be needed. The man compiled all the information he found on Marquise into a folder, but the girl's wondering where he's getting the money from. Ash nods his head. It's got what it takes because it turns out someone loaned the Marquis money to exist. The trade guild has become a center of donation, all because the head son is in love with Navia. In reality, things are quite different. The Brunet realizes that the Marquise has merely found the young man's weakness. Weaknesses are something Ash is aware of, but he knows that Lurtella killed one of his relatives to serve money, which is completely immoral. The boy's father still doesn't know the whole truth, so the young man just pressured the head to agree, and the Marquis didn't tell him anything. In this case, the best solution was to pay Lurtella before getting a lot of problems. In addition to what had just been mentioned, Ash had prepared something much more important, and that was worth counting too. The Marquise is also lent money by the temple, which is an even stranger branch of income than the guild. It seems obvious since Lurtella is now the child of prophecy, but the Brunet is worried about the mistress. This case is completely different. Exactly the same was true even before the prophecy changed. Temple, all this time, almost always gave money. The priest who gives the money is the one who announced the new prophecy, which delivers a lot of false information and suspicion. The girl jumps up from her seat. She can't wait any longer because answers are the most important thing to unravel the tangle of events. Many say the guy is having a secret affair with Miss Lurtella, which is exactly how she appeared in the prophecy. Such an announcement seems extremely strange because, as far as we know, priests are forbidden to have relationships. For those who serve in the temple, relationships are strictly taboo. For some reason, the high priest decided he could afford to behave in such a manner. The girl stares thoughtfully at the reflection on the glass. She doesn't know what to do in a situation like this. Turning to Ash, the heroine asks him to do something very important for her, for it remains the only way out. Bowing his head in an obliging gesture, the brunette promises that he will do whatever Her Highness wishes, for one must remain loyal. Virgo wants to know more details about Navia. Her weaknesses are the most important, yet only one was found: beauty. Apparently, the maiden was really obsessed with flashy dresses, jewelry collections, and beautiful servants. Looking into the eyes of the young man, the woman quietly asks him to seduce his rival in order to further act on a well-established plan. If that is what the princess wants, then the young man will fulfill any order or request. He nods his head in agreement to the venture. The heroine only has to arrange one single meeting for the couple, and then they will get what they want to get. If Ash asks for it, then he will be given a meeting under the circumstances of which he can do what he promises. The man was a dagger given to the girl by her father for her birthday for complete protection and peace of mind. The boy grew up in the guild, for he was being groomed to become an assassin in the future. He had trained for just that, with no sleep or rest. It came out that Ash ended up all alone. No one intended to help him or do him a favor when he needed it. It was when no one wanted anything to do with the guy that his father found him and took him along with him to keep him on the estate. The young man has come to live with the Duke, and so after all he has done for him, the lad is willing to do anything for the family of Pesantria. Memories of when the girl was still very young, being a person no older than 12 years old, pop into my head. His Highness had given the girl a full day off that day, so she had no intention of wasting a moment. She wanted to read longer. Passing by one of the doors that had a light on, the little girl freezes. She thought everyone had been asleep for a long time. Moving closer to the casements, the maiden gently opens them, quietly asking, "Who's there?" so as not to spook him. In the room was none other than Ash, who was completely covered in red liquid. He looked surprised. A hand reaches forward from the floor to grasp the princess's ankle, which elicited a slight shriek from her side. Squinting, the girl bounces away, but she is held in such a way that she manages to do so not on the first or even second try. The man on the floor pulls the future princess towards him, making some strange, frightening noises because of the pain that enveloped him. Ash steps on the guy's arm with his foot so he doesn't ask for help again, and asks my lady to go back to her chambers. Insisting on staying, the blonde asks that everything be explained to her first, and then she can leave with peace of mind. Continuing to swear, the girl tries to insist on her own, completely oblivious to the blonde man who appeared from the back. Hearing someone's footsteps, the maiden turns around sharply to prevent what might be an accident. The brother, who is also completely covered in stains, quietly wonders why Sia got into this room. The girl asks her brother worriedly what happened here, to which he simply betrays the gloves to Ash and scoops her sister up in his arms. Trying to escape and continuing to kick, the damsel tries to jump off, but no one gave her the opportunity. The boy brought his sister into the room and sat her on the bed. He quietly asks her what she was doing there, being all alone. Maiden still wants to know what was going on there, to which the blonde only rubs his head lightly. Children as old as Sia are well past their bedtime at this hour, so they shouldn't be walking around the castle. None of that matters at all. The young man takes the heroine to bed in order to get some sleep instead of reading. Baby still can't sleep, so he promises he'll answer all the questions put to him, whatever they may be. Kissing his sister on the forehead, the young man asks her to go to sleep. All he has to do is wait until morning, and then he can explain himself, because now is not the time. Closing her eyes, the girl watches through the slit as her brother turns around and heads to leave the room, to finish what he started. The servants who met the lad had absolutely no reaction to his behavior or his soiled clothes. What had happened made the girl think that everyone, all along, had been perfectly aware of what was going on in the castle. It was only later that the heroine learned the whole truth. That very day, Brother and Ash dealt with the assassins sent to the prophecy girl. It was because of the girl that many servants suffered and died, trying to slow down the mercenaries as best they could. The family of Pantria had not a few sufferings to bear, and the maiden, as a child, had to go through them in order to grow up. It's funny that after everything that happened before, now history was repeating itself because new mercenaries appeared as if out of nowhere. Not expecting to hear an answer, the princess grins. She asks if Miss Lurtella sent the men, which basically seems obvious. The heroine had long ago noticed she was being followed, and so looped around the garden. It was time to do what she had promised and deal with each of them. The mercenaries who were going to deal with the defenseless princess turned out to be the ones who would be killed in her place. A whistle blows throughout the estate, followed by Ash appearing and attacking the black-clad men with a swing. Bouncing off to the side, the guy gets into the position that is most convenient for throwing another punch towards his opponent. Ash shades his mistress so that no one else will try to hurt her or mess anything up. She's ordering me to deal with the guys. The man apologizes for not dealing with his attackers much earlier, because now it almost seems too late. Of course, the brunette follows all orders without further ado. He asks the princess to turn away and close her eyes so as not to see anything unnecessary. The lady stands with her arms folded across her chest, continuing to observe what is going on around her. She's enjoying the painting. Ash, as usual, is doing the best, because the opponents are flying sideways one by one as if weightless. The heroine doesn't expect things to end up not in their favor, so she helps the man by talking about the fighter on the right. Bouncing off, the guy swings around, thus disposing of the last opponent, who probably already regretted a lot for messing with him. Dropping to one knee, the young man apologizes. He didn't want my lady to see all that had happened on the battlefield. Smiling, the lady assures me that everything is fine. She can't act inappropriately, so she holds out a napkin to wipe her face. Freezing, the brunette looks surprised because it's Her Highness's handkerchief. He could have just washed his face so he wouldn't get the thing dirty. The man got hit hard by the attackers who were originally intended for the princess. In case of such an outcome of events, the guy simply does not dare to refuse, because he realizes how it can end for him. The guy turns toward the victims. One of them he left alive so he could deliver to the Duke's estate. If the mercenary says something, then it will be possible to officially accuse Lurtella of attacking Urja. It's all worth keeping secret, and that's because they were sent by none other than Lurtella. No one else had dared such an attack right on the palace grounds. It's worth finding out how Navia is connected to the temple first, otherwise it's dangerous to mess with her. The survivor should be taken to his father. The guy can be locked up in a cage because he may still be needed in court or in life someday. Outside, night had fallen. The castle has fallen asleep and only the heroine remains, standing by the window, receiving the bird. Every day, the chick flies from the estate to the capital and back, which makes him very tired. From the letter, the girl realized that it was quite difficult to find who was behind the guild of assassins who were attacking. Attention is distracted by a knock on the door. which seems to purposely sound overly annoying, even for such a person. The maiden invites the arrival to enter, so none other than Alfredo appears and greets his sister. A young man has come to deliver something important. He digs in before finally pulling through something that will make the heroine wonder. In the hands of the hero turns out a snow-white dress, which by law should have belonged to Ursula. Getting up from her seat and clearly nervous, the heroine asks how exactly the man managed to sneak the item in question along with him. Putting his hands out with the garment forward, the guy seems to be putting it on the figure of a woman. It belongs to her and no one else. Virgo was supposed to wear a dress to her wedding, which ended up being a bust. Alfredo looks surprised, as if he didn't know that. Looking into Venetia's eyes, the blonde asks why he was brought in. Turns out some marquise wanted to steal the thing. That person was none other than Miss Lurtella. The boy nods in agreement, for it turned out to be true. The guy's eyes light up with a bad fire. A maiden wasn't supposed to touch other people's things without asking, even under these circumstances. The maiden sadly examines the garment that ended up in her hands. Navia, the new child of prophecy, is therefore no longer a strange marquis. Changing the topic of conversation, Belle asks repeatedly where the boy got the dress. She notices his surprise. In fact, it was pure coincidence. The young man went to get the gift. However, he saw a girl with pink hair, so he followed her into the bar. The brunette waves his hand, indicating that he didn't mistake her for an acquaintance. There was no way he could ever mistake her for anyone else. The interlocutor nods her head in agreement with what she has heard. She throws the dress on the table so that she can no longer hold its weight. The heroine takes a seat on the couch, asking about what happened at the bar. That's the fun part right now. The young man takes a seat across from him. He starts to say something, but at first it appeared that only Ursula's name was heard. The heroine repeated the name while looking at the dress she stole from her closet. She wasn't too verbose. The boy was sickened that the name was mentioned in such a place, so much so that he just wanted to beat everyone up. The brunette decided not to waste any energy, so he just grabbed the dress and ran away. He's asking for praise. The heroine shifts her gaze to the thing again. The snow-white fabric made it clear that you could only wear it to a wedding. Turning to the guy across from her again, the maiden is about to say something, but ends up just stammering, unable to gather her thoughts. Memories of the prince who told Ursula that the most exceptional color is white because it stands out the most come to mind. White has the ability to add sophistication to anything or person, which is why it is considered so beautiful and special. The prince had seen many outfits, but this was one of the best. He's sure the garment would look great on a maiden, even without the useless accessories. The hero gently brings his hand down to the top of his friend's head, stroking her hair so as not to mess up her coiffure. He said the accessories were not in the style of Pessantria, who could outshine any of them without any effort. It seems as if all the air has suddenly become poisoned, making the girl breathe harder. Love is gone. Turning to Venetia, Ursula talks again about how she has absolutely no need for the dress he brought with him. To the heroine, such attire was just an empty reward that one was still willing to accept. What happened to the girl and what she got was more for future years spent in the Empire. Now things have really changed, for the worse. The heroine is no longer Princess Pessantria, and she doesn't need a dress. Smiling lightly to put her friend's guard down, the blonde asks for a quick return of the item to Miss Lurtell. The guy gets up from his seat, walking his boots right through the hem. He gently takes the beauty by the face, asking what her problem is. The girl looks silently into the eyes of her interlocutor. She can't explain why exactly she acted this way. The brunette examines the features of the heroine's face. I can't believe she almost had that sad look on her face the whole time. Pessantria puts her palm to her cheek. She had never even considered exactly what she looked like from the outside to those around her. The girl reaches out and runs her hand through the hair of the young man across from her. She asks if what he just said is true. Snuggling into the palm that had been set up, the boy rubs against it lightly, nodding in agreement. The guy turns to kiss the palm on the other side, continuing to look into the beauty's eyes. Sia interrupts the guy, asking him not to do that again for his own good. She's a little busy, so they'll talk a little later. Alfredo agrees, for he arrived in the room without any warning, which of course took away attention. The woman's gaze shifts back to the dress, which is already lying on the floor instead of the table it was placed on. Sitting down at the table, the heroine accepts the letter. The day after tomorrow, there will already be a banquet in honor of the arriving knights. All around, instead of discussing the banquet, talk about the heroine and about who she will be with, because they turned their backs on her. It's incredibly interesting to see if the girl will show up at the event, as she's still in the palace due to the collapse. Some believe the princess won't be there because of a former lover and Miss Lurtella, who will also be there. Others, on the contrary, think that the lady will only come to look at the prince, who has so far failed to be released. Everyone around here wants Azriel to arrive because then there will be a show program at the party. It's unbelievable that the lady has lost all her status so quickly, so she's obligated to show up. Some think Pantria will cry because she sees Navia, and some think about the scandal they might get up to. A smile appears on the cute face. The blonde couldn't let this go, so she'll give what the audience wants. Some will have a tearful tantrum, and some may even faint with shame, but it will be worth it. All this doesn't mean that the shenanigans will be done on Azriel's behalf. She made sure to make a better plan. There is a knock on the room, and then, from behind the door, Azriel appears, smiling obligingly at the princess who summoned her. The heroine asks her friend to move a little closer to her so they can talk more quietly amongst themselves. The beauty rises slightly from her chair to whisper the desired information in the ear of the maid, who seems to have understood everything. Lighting up with joy, the brunette promises that of course she will do everything she can to help. Navia won't be a hindrance. Nodding, the blonde thanks the maiden, who seems to be just about the only one who hasn't turned her back on mistress so far. Secondary roles are just as crucial, so the girl must take care of the couple for the event. Thoughts are interrupted again by the noise outside. The girl waves her hand, indicating that the man is allowed to enter. The elderly butler bows courteously, bringing forward the box of letters that arrived with the past ones. Humming, the princess accepts one of the top letters, but then returns it to its place after a few seconds. The maiden asks to throw away all the mail she has received and in return send only one single important letter. The man accepts the item, hearing about how if there are any more offers, he should just throw them away. The heroine had long ago decided who to go with. It will be a mystery to everyone, but only for the time being. It is evening outside, so the lady rises from her chair, leaving some documentation on the table. Taking a seat on the soft bed, Azriel sighs heavily. The day seemed too long, so a rest would be good. Miss Lurtella will get what she deserves, because everything that happened before was just an act of innocent pranks. The lady hopes that Navia is looking forward to the banquet just as much as she is, because that's where an unforgettable surprise awaits her. There is a noise in the castle from the morning that keeps you awake. Preparations for the banquet are well underway, nearing completion. If the event is at a palace, however, you won't even have to do anything special because some people don't eat to fit into the dress. Maiden will have to do only the simplest thing, and that is to begin preparing a plan that will suit the destruction of Lurtella. Hiding around a corner, the heroine watches the figures that appear nearby. The servant sits down on his knees, apologizing to Navia. He thought the thing was a trinket, not the princess's thing. The blonde pulls back, saying that she's not mad at the young man because she only had to ask to clarify the situation. The man holds out a brooch, to which the heroine is surprised to ask where he managed to get the thing that belonged to royalty. Miss Lurtella seems quite shallow for not immediately recognizing where the item came from. As Navia stalked the girl, she still made one of the biggest mistakes that helped with the plan. The princess dropped the brooch that Azriel had picked up. She couldn't immediately see what could be done with it. Picking up the item, the heroine clutches it in her hands. It will still come in handy, which means you should definitely keep the brooch just in case. Yesterday, the maiden summoned Ash again, however. As he was about to leave, she made him stop. A great plan had appeared in Pantria's mind that promised to be marvelous to execute. Virgo promises he'll tell you everything. Pulling an item out of her pocket, the heroine holds out the brooch, saying that it belongs to the Marquise. The hero bows, promising that he'll take the chance that mistress has given him. It's in his power to do his best, even if something doesn't work out right away. Ash didn't fail. So following a strict plan, he shared his find with absolutely everyone around him while with the servants. As soon as the rumors reached Navia, she herself came to personally deal with the servant who had dared to steal from her, but he assured her that he had found the thing on the grass. The boy didn't dare say anything more in response, because he was sure he would never dare do a terrible thing. Looking into the young lady's eyes, the man reiterates that he would never dare to steal from his mistress. The heroine freezes, looking at her interlocutor with a mesmerized gaze that immediately indicates her interest. The tears themselves begin to roll down the cheeks of the young man, who promises that he is not lying, which means he can be trusted. The girl's hand moves closer to the servant's face, while she herself asks if these are definitely true words. Azriel looks out from behind, But seeing all that is going on, she smiles, for she realizes that the plan worked just fine. The brother, who had long since arrived at his father's estate, had already settled in before he was interrupted by a letter that arrived from the princess. Nodding, the young man accepts the paper, which was sent quite recently, and therefore pertained to the banquet. Having quickly read the contents of the letter, the lad orders the servants to prepare the horse on which the lord will ride. Opening his closet, the blond man talks about going to the capital, even though the horses were going to be cooked in the morning because of the banquet. The blue-eyed man turns around, glaring menacingly at his assistant, who seems intent on pissing off his master. Bowing down, the man runs away, saying that he will arrange everything. Everyone on the estate had long ago realized that it was better to agree. Things were much better at the temple, but the monks were also preparing for the event. One of them asks the monk about meeting the princess. The smile seems cold. A man realizes that he is lucky because that very special day has finally arrived. Princess Ura Pantri was also ready to do whatever needed to be done. She couldn't wait for the moment of revenge. The maid of honor who was collecting the empress asks what kind of shoes to bring. They should be tidy. Running from side to side, the maid tried to complete as many of the tasks she had to accomplish as possible. The slipper ended up on the blonde's foot, so the maid asks permission to leave the chambers. Allowing her to leave, the heroine stares sadly in the wake. After the changes in the prophecy, everyone turned their backs on the princess because they cared. The butler, who stayed close by, tries to make conversation. He picks up on the fact that it's beautiful weather outside. Leaning closer to his ear, the man announces that His Highness and Miss Lurtella are heading down the hall. Coughing, the acquaintance asks when the prince who will keep the young lady company will arrive. Blondie is not known to be the most punctual person, but it is best that he arrives before the dancing begins. An acquaintance approaches, asking why the lady doesn't want to wear any jewelry, but it will weigh down the image. As night falls, the princess awaits a dear guest. He will be the one who will be her date and who will dance with her. The maids who have surrounded the girl are chirping about how anxious they are about the arrival of that very companion. Belle nods. She is more than confident in the man, so all she has to do is wait for that very moment. The girls have a lot of anxiety, so the best solution is to go for a walk while they all wait. Already being near the front door, the ladies freeze because someone on the other side spoke the casement coming inside. The blond man with the wondering eyes bows. He would, like a true gentleman, open the door for the maids, but arrived at Ursha's house. The blonde falters. She quietly says the name of her brother, who was in the room quite unexpectedly. The man leans closer, cheerfully greeting his sister, who must have been waiting for her companion by now. The couple hadn't seen each other for a very long time because the maiden was only 15 years old the last time they met. The face hasn't changed at all. Extending his palm towards the heroine, the young man suggests that she finally follow him into the hall. As the couple enters the room where the banquet is being held, they gather a lot of stares that can't believe Rias has arrived. Remaining calm and not showing a single emotion on her face, the heroine realizes that now the show will begin. There's a whole crowd of girls gathered around Lurtella discussing the desserts the princess can't try because of how tight her corset is. The castle is still fun, even without desserts to replace with other activities. The topic changes because one of the ladies says that the son of the Duke of Pantria and Ura Pantri herself will be arriving. Anger is instantly reflected on the face of the protagonist, who is annoyed by the former crown princess, who will not settle down. Until a moment ago, everyone in the room was chatting enthusiastically, but the conversations were replaced by the sepulchral silence that had formed. Those around her are easy to understand because the lady was once a crown princess, but hardly ever shows up at banquets. Ura Pantri, who has spent the last 3 years at war, is getting even more attention. Absolutely everyone in the empire knows such a famous name. It doesn't even surprise anyone anymore with how popular it is. Rias has drawn a ton of attention since he was a kid, and not just because he's the Duke's heir. The boy received his mother's beauty. He started learning fencing at a very early age, and as time went on, he honed his skills more and more, which only got better. Reaching such heights, the young man received a sword from the emperor himself while he was still 16 years old. No one would admire a man if all he did was swing a sword. He also had other values in his life. Rias is talented at paperwork, so he not only helped his father, but also participated in the running of the duchy, doing so quite skillfully. When the young man turned 20, he volunteered for the war, as he was not going to sit back and cash in on someone else's glory. His brother had slew many enemies on the front lines, so he was given a title in the kingdom of Sepia where he was stationed. In the kingdom, of course, it became known that the hero was going to war. The girls began to write letters of complaint that were filled with tears. Remembering the way her brother was missed by the crowd of maidens, the princess laughs lightly, no longer trying to hold back. The blonde asks his sister what made her laugh so hard, to which Sia merely waves her hand condescendingly. She remembered the old days. Maiden was also quite amused to watch the people around her whispering, but not going to pull herself together and come over to talk. The heroine decided not to tell her brother her entire plan, so she wondered exactly how much he knew. Nodding her head toward the tables, the girl promises that she will be back very soon as she picks up a glass of wine. Pushing through the crowd, which seemed to be getting thicker and thicker, the heroine finally spots a servant with a tray. The man politely asks what my lady wishes, to which she simply accepts the glass from his hands in silence. Nodding to his mistress, the servant advances towards Lurtella, which means everything is going according to plan. He speaks of a young man being struck by the girl's beauty and asked to pass the glass. Humming, the pretty girl pretends to enjoy it. Pretty soon the first dance will be announced, and that's where everything will be known. One drink won't hurt, even if you have to hit the dance floor pretty soon. The heroine is confident she can handle it. Looking away, the maiden smiles. Navia will love the flavor because the drink is easy to drink and wonderfully sweet. It's impossible to see that anything has been put in there. Approaching her brother again, the girl nods. It's all set, which means there will only be more interesting developments to come. Miss Lurtella drinks, trying to gulp down as much as she can. If it goes on like this, you can understand that the event will end just fine. The man quietly asks Ercia if it's definitely just wine, to which she nods easily. A little potion had to be added too. Humming, the young man looks into his sister's eyes. He doesn't believe that a little, because he knows Ercia like the back of his hand. While adjusting her tie, the heroine picks up on the fact that the potion was ordered from her father, and thus was quite good. At first, the princess wanted to mix a potion of truth herself, but it didn't work out because of the complicated recipe. Glancing at the girl who, staggering slightly, was only a few steps away from them, the heroine realizes it's time to reap the benefits. Getting very close to her rival's face, the lady talks about how she sprayed all those dirty rumors around the palace. Milady shrugged, for she knew all about it. Nothing worked, for the girl had to lose her temper. Smiling nastily, the beauty assures the heroine that she absolutely does not care about her every action. Once Navia takes the throne, she will try her best to bring the maiden to her knees and embarrass the future empress properly. Turns out the potion worked exactly as the plan called for, after all. The show's just getting started. Now everyone present will understand who the main character in the castle is, and why Lurtella is acting this way. Somehow the prince didn't think and replaced the queen with this girl who doesn't understand anything. That was mistake number 1. Her mind flashes back to the very day the girl first entered the banquet hall. She walked under the arm of the prince. The emperor and empress were always the first to dance, while the prince's couple danced next in seniority. The couple always danced before the others, which gave them great honor. The sleepless nights were finally paying off. The girl does not care at all about the memories, because now the brunette has actually destroyed everything that was between them. However, there was one but. The heroine has been on her way to becoming a princess for so long, so she labored day and night. We can't let Lurtella screw this up. From that very moment, Ercia decided that everyone would play by her rules, which were made up for a reason. Stepping back, the girl asks Lady Lurtella to calm down and not make unnecessary noise right in the banquet hall. Holding out the handkerchief, the maiden asks that she be careful, for no one would want her to fall by pure chance. Navia hums. She warned of the consequences because there was no way she would ever let anyone treat her like that. Whatever is done will be for the good of the girl. They didn't notice how the atmosphere in the hall changed. The princess gently grasps the shoulder of her interlocutor. She seems to have had a little too much to drink, so we need to be as careful as possible. Bouncing to the side and dropping her palm, the blonde asks in a rude manner to be left alone, breaking into a menacing scream. Strangely, the girl remained too calm even after the potion. Maybe that's just her true face. Frowning, the heroine asks if the former princess knows the one person who has been around her lately. Virgo doesn't realize who he's talking about. Really wish I could stand back and ask more, but now everyone is watching. Attempts to subdue Miss Lurtella continue. Instead of passing and resting, the lady slaps the hand of the person she is talking to. The heroine takes the palm of her hand, pretending to ooze because she was actually in a bit of pain from the blow. The girl, on the other hand, asks the princess not to try to pass off what isn't true as truth, since it almost didn't touch her. The people around are talking amongst themselves, discussing the young lady's behavior, for it is not worthy of someone with such a title. No one understood why the girl had been chosen for a new prediction and a prediction that had changed for some reason. Azriel appeared out of nowhere and was on edge, for she had promised to protect the princess. Lurtella has no right to behave like this. The heroine asked the maid to bring her a glass of water, and herself ran immediately to fight Ursia, who did not deserve it. Turning to the maid, the heroine looks uninterested as she talks about how the princess is the best. The girl grabs hold of the maid's dress, who doesn't quite seem to realize what might happen to her in the next few minutes. Trying to move farther away, the brunette begs to be let go so she doesn't get hurt for nothing. God has chosen someone else, so someone like Lady Lurtella cannot fulfill the prophecy. Unable to endure such ignorance any longer, the princess swung around and made contact with all her might with her hand against her companion's cheek. The brunette instantly grasps the bruised spot, stunned, looking down at the floor, for she had just been called a commoner. Taking a seat across from the girl, Navia warns the maid not to approach her again, lest she make things worse for herself. Pesantria, who is nearby, is watching what is happening. Miss had done her part perfectly, so now she showed her true colors. No longer intending to tolerate any more humiliation towards her friend, the princess steps forward, beginning to speak. Belle is interrupted by Azriel. According to her, if Lurtella was the maiden of prophecy, she would not have struck an innocent man. The heroine tries to come forward to silence Portuba. She wasn't going according to plan, so it was worth saving her faster. Halfway through, Navia was the one who happened to be next to her, and as a consequence delivered a blow on the cheek just as the maid was being struck. Turning away, the girl tries to open her eyes. Her cheek has turned a red color that can be seen from miles away. The people around them are whispering in surprise about how horribly the child of prophecy is behaving. She dared to ruin everything. Not realizing what just happened, the heroine examines her hand, amazed at her actions. It seems the girl has started to come to her senses, so we need to report to the Duke as soon as possible that the potion has an expiration date. The veil fell and the blonde's true gut came out. She wards the floor, looking around in surprise. There's no way people will shut up, starting to speculate. Many people think that the oracle was wrong to put such a person. Everyone from the beginning doubted the veracity of the prophecy, which seemed fake, but if it was really true, the maiden would be able to fix something. The girl extends her hand for assistance. This causes Lurtella to go into a full-blown tizzy of terror. The girl looks around, listening to the rumors that are creeping in. No one is able to come to terms with what happened. Apparently, the heroine wanted to get rid of the princess too badly, so the latter fulfills her mute request by letting go of her hand. Falling rapidly, Navia realizes that the collision is going to be a hard one because a tower of glasses can be seen behind her. It seems that what happens next is going to hurt, so it will feel great right now and then too. Before she could say anything, the maiden came to her senses in the arms of His Highness, who pulled her closer to him. The man, for some reason, did not help Lurtella, and chose to be the former lover who no longer meant anything. Thanks to the brunette, the former princess wasn't hurt one bit. She has no way of knowing what exactly the prince is up to. Navia is in tears. She can't believe that everything that happened to her, and it was all her fault. The heroine, trying to play the good part to the end, crouches beside her rival, reaching out to her. No reciprocal kindness is felt, as Belle screams about how it's all Ursia's fault for setting up the whole horror. Asking if the princess is bruised, Pesantria steps aside, for the maiden herself rises from her seat. I think the girl said some name that sounded first. We had to find out exactly who this mystery man was. The blonde approaches her friend, offering her to rest in her chambers, to which she receives a new portion of negativity. The girl smiles, then walks past the heroine. She promises she won't just let this go unpunished. Staring in the maiden's wake, Ursia promises that she will, but she doesn't care if Navia is from the prophecy, for such behavior is not acceptable. The servants and the arrivals on the sides start talking again about how the Marquise won't be a future princess, because she just can't handle her role. Silencing everyone, the girl menacingly asks if the acquaintance is getting the punishment she deserves. Deva could not have been chosen by the god himself to be the one to defend the empire and help everyone around him. It all makes a lot more sense now. It doesn't take a wise man to realize that there was something fishy about the scheme. Everything was already sufficient for the day of the event, so all that was left was to wait for a reciprocal move from Miss Lurtella. The guards take Navia under their arms, asking her to come with them. The prince doesn't move from his seat or help his new lover even after everything that has happened. There's definitely something weird going on between the couple because they haven't exchanged a single word or come together. Attention is drawn to a voice from the side calling Sia by name to speak. It turned out to be the brother, who realized that the girl was in a lot of trouble. He noticed the scarlet stain, so he brought tissues. Assuring that everything is perfectly fine, the girl asks not to worry. She won't agree to have the wound treated. The man nods in response, but still recommends doing the grooming after the banquet to make sure it's completely safe. The conversation is interrupted by someone from behind calling the princess by name. They couldn't afford to touch his shoulder. Azriel, along with her brother, stands by her side, quietly asking if Ursha is in pain. They disappeared from sight not too long ago, but have now reappeared. The maiden had not seen Portuba for a long time, for he was, after all, the prince's assistant. The girl wanted nothing to do with him. Bowing his head, the man greets the girl as a crown princess, even if it's been a while since she's been in that status. The young man's attitudes haven't changed at all. It seemed that everything that had happened had no effect on his opinion, which was why Rubella was acting like this. Nodding, the damsel picks up on the fact that it had indeed been a very long time since they had seen each other due to the fact that she hardly saw the prince anymore. Rubel hasn't changed at all. He still behaved respectfully, trying to please everyone, but at the same time shying away from judgment. Among all the prince's assistants, the young man is the kindest. He is a great person, but overly emotional, which leads to certain difficulties in work. It is because of this complex character that the guy will never become the closest to His Highness, but the princess doesn't know this for sure, since she has never worked with him. You can tell right away that the two are related, as she and Azriel are very similar in their kindness and innocence. Moving closer to the maiden, the blonde reaches out to inspect the wound. She asks why the maid interfered. It all happened because the brunette was afraid mistress would get hurt. The girl is grateful for the rescue, but she would hate to see anyone suffer. The princess asks not to worry because it's not the maid's fault. She was just worried about her condition without any bad intentions. Turning to Sir Rubel, Ursha asks him to go home early. It will be the right thing to do to pull yourself together. The banquet continues. The former princess is flanked by noble ladies who try to ask Her Highness how she is feeling. Everyone sympathizes with the young lady. They thought Miss Lurtella had been chosen by God, but it turned out she was just faking it, for which she would receive her punishment. Raising her glass to sip her drink, the maiden is thankful for such concern, for it is incredibly important to her that things are just the way they are. Many believe that Navia will get what she deserves, and it will be done by the prince. The girl can't help but agree because it is the prince who must do it. There's no way the ladies are going to calm down talking about how sad the prince has been lately. Perhaps it was because the prophecy separated him from his beloved. It's clear, and it's been clear for a long time, the young lady didn't leave the palace either, only because of the one she loved with all her heart. The couple is often seen together, so that's probably why the rumors started. No one knows the truth. The lady had long been aware that people around her were whispering about her and the prince, but she had never had the chance to hear any details. Ursha really did love the young man, so she thought he had exactly the same feelings. Now she wasn't sure. Truth be told, the heroine never knew the truth, but for some reason right now she was thinking about it so hard. Nothing else matters, and even if the future emperor loves her, she doesn't feel anything anymore. Despite all the things that roll around in my head non-stop, it's hard to understand why the young man is always there at the right moment. Hoping to save his sister from an unpleasant situation, his brother approaches from behind, calling His Highness by name. Nodding, the man greets Duke Rias. They hadn't seen each other for an extended period of time, so this reaction makes sense. Moving closer, the young man bows his head in respect. It's been 3 years, but they haven't felt it at all. The girl can only be happy about how quickly her brother came, because he and the prince do not get along badly. Now she won't be alone with him. Rias is only 3 years older than His Highness, meaning they can be considered almost the same age. This small age difference used to be felt quite strongly, for the prince could never defeat his brother in any fight. The guy wielded the sword so well that the emperor gave him a standing ovation. He admired such abilities. The king asked the young man to be a sparring partner for his son, who was just learning to wield a sword. The brunette nods, indicating that His Majesty is saddened by the fact that he couldn't meet one of the best knights. For some reason, the young man tries to close his sister off from the prince, as if he's afraid of their clash. He promises that he will go to the king right away to meet him. The lady is on her heels but can barely see the prince's face, so she only hears him ask about the collapse in the road that is almost dismantled. It was not easy to clear the rubble and rebuild the road after all that had happened, so the young man has only to praise the servants for the good work they did. Nothing's going to work anyway, because it's the princess that the brunette wants to talk to anyway. She asks her brother to step back. Looking directly into Rias's eyes, it's as if the girl is trying to reassure him that everything will be perfectly fine. The conversation will be about what exactly a Virgo should do that hopes to resolve the situation, so there is nothing to regret here. The maiden examines the young man from head to toe. She did not immediately notice the hairstyle, which the man only wears to banquets, and the suit, which was given by his beloved. The young man never appears in public in the same outfit, so this kind of outburst is not like the prince himself. Today was His Highness's first outing with the new princess, who ended up behaving inappropriately. Interrupting the beauty's thoughts, the man asks if he can speak to the beauty in private, to which the beauty nods. The maiden was glad it was a request and not an order because the brunette asked politely if it could be done without any pressure. The guy knows how to use the advantage of his position, because even in such a situation the girl cannot refuse the prince. Backtracking down one of the corridors, the couple stops so that no one has a chance to overhear the conversation. Leaning against the pillar, the maiden reminds us that if you wish to speak to her, a formal request can be made. The girl remembers always running to the prince at the first call he gave into the air. With the young man, they almost never saw each other because of work and duties, so when the opportunity arose, the beautiful girl carried on with all her legs. It was like this every time he wanted to meet. The girl never said no because she was afraid. Moving closer and stopping just a few centimeters away, the prince mockingly asks if he really needs an official request to talk. The guy leans even closer. He warned his former lover not to go too far, but as usual, she didn't listen. Raising his hand to the princess's cheek, the man once again asks if she will obey him when he orders something. Belle freezes as if she's standing still. Lately, His Highness has been letting himself go too much. Dropping her hand, the blonde repeats what she said earlier. She will not forgive Miss Lurtella for the insult she has caused. The maiden is not going to sit idly by when she is treated like this, for she is no longer a crown princess who will remain silent, but a Pisanthria. Navia acted like a little kid when she put on the whole show. If a man doesn't want to watch something like this, it's better to deal with it. The maiden is about to leave, however she is stopped. The prince grasps the hand of the princess, who looks on in surprise. The guy slowly leans right over his hand and then kisses the backside as a sign of respect or something. The heroine jerks her palm away at the speed of light, which literally burns due to a strange sensation that cannot be read. Glaring menacingly at her interlocutor, the maiden warns him. She hopes it never happens again. Turning away, the princess takes one last look at the young man and then promptly leaves that very spot, heading for the middle of the hall. I wish the prince hadn't done what he did and thought with his head before destroying everything he could. The girl can't understand why the guy did what he's doing now interfered. He never seems to have changed, but the heroine herself has changed. One can only hope that one day the heart will stop beating so frantically when a beautiful woman looks at a man. What happened was enough. That's not all that happened, however. Since the prince and Lurtella are gone, things got easier. According to the rules of the ball, the first dance would now belong to Rias and Ercia, who were supposed to go second. Lurtella isn't done yet, but so far things are going strictly according to plan without any deviations that could get in the way. The banquet will last all night, however. You better hurry because no one knows what else might happen. Footsteps and rustling can be heard behind the beauty, which could have been incredibly frightening if the maiden didn't know in advance who was there. Ash throws off his hood and steps into the light. He didn't want to disturb Her Highness, however. He had some urgent news. The princess had ordered a servant to follow Navia, so the lad obediently waited until the maiden was alone to comfort. In return for kindness, the beauty tried to get the man into bed, and even if they didn't have anything, it didn't mean anything. The girl just passed out because of the potion she was given. The protagonist doesn't immediately realize what exactly this time is about. The jar was given to him by his lordship. No one knows about the side effects, especially since there can be irreversible effects from excess. Frowning, the maiden asks if Lurtella is dead. Perhaps it was just the big news the servant wanted to report. In the end, the princess was simply unconscious, meaning that she could be considered to have fallen asleep. He examined the companion, so everything is fine. Nodding, the heroine relaxes a bit, because as much as she hated her rival, she didn't need the trouble. Ash had come on another case, and it was all tied up with a priest that had already been reported. He's also involved in a case. The man is interrupted by a rustle and a voice that wants something from the princess. Instantly throwing his hood back on, the young man turns around. Forcing the guy to squat, the maiden promises that she'll distract whoever has arrived, and Ash can just try not to make a sound. The servant in size and height is even bigger than the main character, so hiding him will not be easy, so you need to think of something. The door slowly opens, causing my insides to clench. Alfredo appears on the balcony and flaps his eyes in surprise. Smiling, the princess tries to hide her nervousness, which makes her almost shake with fear that someone will notice. Without moving from her seat, the maiden waits for the young man himself to come closer. He asks what the sister is doing here. Spotting someone behind him, the young man glares menacingly at the figure. He asks who is behind the young lady's back. It's not that important because the lady wants to know a lot more about how Venice ended up here, because she was sure she locked the doors. Turning away, the guy apologizes. He seems to be in no mood. However, he didn't think to break in and thus interfere with what was going on. Smiling, the guy reminds him that only members of the imperial family are allowed on the terrace, which means he's allowed. The former crown princess had completely forgotten that she was no longer allowed to be here. She used to like to come to the balcony to relax. His brother is outside, so the young man figured no one was here. He had nothing to apologize for, even if it was painful to hear. If Beauty hadn't forgotten the rules, there was no way she would have come here. She was aware of the fact that she no longer had access. The boy smiles, snuggling into the girl's arm, but after a second he looks menacingly at the hood, once again questioning who is behind him. Instead of answering the question posed, the beauty asks the young man if he would like to have tea tomorrow on the terrace. The man lowers the heroine's hand, looking sadly somewhere off to the side. Virgo can't believe she's just been rejected outright. Realizing that it's not quite usual to behave this way, the brunette quickly gathers himself and nods vigorously because he wants to. Smiling, the princess promises that she'll get everything ready and will be waiting for the guy at her place tomorrow to enjoy some time together. The man nods, indicating that they will meet soon. Looking at the hooded man behind him again, he involuntarily clenched his fist. Turning around before he leaves, the brunette assures him that it's okay because his brother isn't coming here. Ash stands up, asking if it's okay if they just let a potential witness go, to which he is reassured. Alfredo would never go against his childhood friend, so there's no need to worry about such trivialities. Turning again to the interlocutor, the lady asks to continue where they left off. She wants to know about the priest. The man below is watching the terrace where the two men are standing and talking about him. The blonde man pulls the hood off his head and asks if everything is going according to plan. He seems quite confident of his imminent victory. The princess will be out and down very soon, which means that the conversation will also take place at exactly the right moment. The priest smiles. He has been waiting for this day for a very long time, and finally, after everything that has happened, he can reap the benefits. Rias, who has remained in the hall, is talking to the ladies, who like an endless stream pour in to talk to him. The young man notices the princess approaching. Asking the girl to wait for him, he heads towards his sister. Finding himself next to Sia, the blonde leans in and quietly asks what's up with her since she's back so abruptly. Whispering something in her ear, the lady talks about learning new information about the new priest. It turns out that he came to see Lady Lurtella, and that was just recently. It was odd that a priest from the temple would want something from the daughter of the Marquis, who had nothing else to do with it at all. Virgo is the new child of a prophecy that has been fulfilled, but only changed now. No one knows, however, maybe there was more going on there than just talking. The door was closed, which meant the couple could cuddle and kiss. They could be in cahoots. The situation takes a different turn. Ash said he hid in the closet and saw everything with his own eyes. Lurtella was under the potion, so she shouldn't remember him. The high priest is forbidden to love, nor is he allowed to marry or have children. He took an oath to do so. Even a kiss for such a person is considered something terrible because he has no right to it. Noticing that her brother has been staring at one point for 5 minutes, the maiden calls his name. The boy wondered how much his sister had grown. When the young man left, the girl was still very young, But now she had grown so much that it was impossible to believe it. Sighing, the heroine agrees. She was old enough to marry the crown prince who proposed to her. Bending down, the man kisses his sister on the cheek. For some reason, he's like Mom and Dad always do this as a supportive thing. Looking into the maiden's eyes, the young man asks if she is very upset about the prophecy. It was pure truth. Sighing, the heroine promises that she's not upset anymore. Disregarding how much of an impact it had, she didn't care. Smiling, the brother nods. It is important to him that his sister not feel resentment and disappointment for the rest of her life. The woman was concerned about something else. As a crown princess, she looked down on her father, but now she doesn't even know how to act. The man doesn't share the experience because in his mind it's very simple. You just have to act normal and then happiness will not bypass you. There won't be any problems, so you shouldn't worry so much, even if everything seems terrible. Everyone always thought that the girl was above the rest, because no one in the Pantri family could compare with such talent. Mom always said that the emperor stole their family's most precious treasure, which showed her love for her daughter. That being said, my mom was then throwing glasses at the wall because of the rage that wouldn't let her calm down. It was funny to remember, yet it seemed to his brother that the blonde was ready to hurl even an entire castle back then. The girl's not that upset. She used to only see her family a couple times a year, but they were always welcome. Somehow everyone else thinks this family is tough and cold-blooded because it's just a mask that's visible on the outside. No one knows what's inside the family. They are always friendly to each other and are insanely happy to be in such an environment. Pretty soon the beauty will be coming home, so parents should expect more changes. From the precious treasure is going to turn the whole castle upside down and then come home safe and sound. Interrupting the conversation, the blonde man turns toward the clock. It's almost midnight. The clock shows only 10 minutes left, which means it's time to head back. The young man looks at his sister, who asks if he will go with her. The girls in the back glare at the couple with angry looks. Smiling, the boy assures her that he'd be happy to hang around with Ursula, who is already almost always busy, just like himself. The maiden waves her arms, indicating that the blonde man can still linger, but he objects. He has something to say to his sister. The couple is going to hurry to make sure they aren't late for anything, so they head swiftly forward down one of the corridors. Guy speaks first about how he didn't expect that priest to have such a relationship with Lady Lurtella. It's worth remembering that the girl is undoubtedly beautiful, but it can't be worth ruining a vow because of her, because he won't get any power or money. Also disconcerting is the fact that the couple's age difference is not at all small either, so that adds to the questions. We need to report to the temple as soon as possible, but that plan won't work. They will start denying everything, and then the situation will be lost. His brother nods, for he didn't immediately think of the fact that they needed proof. Surely they must be hiding and leaving no trace. One must fabricate evidence to finally get what they need, but to do so, the man will need a sample of the priest's handwriting. The fact that prophecy can be completely false should not be overlooked. It could have been tampered with. Virgo only hinted at this fact during the ball, and Lurtella is already all pale, which proves the fact that she's hiding something. It was the new priest who announced the new prophecy. Something will remain unclean because it is usually the head of the temple or a select few who get the news. The prophecy changed just as the head of the church changed, which leaves even more notes to latch onto. The guy turns and then stops. He asks if the maiden wants to know what can be done. You can forge handwriting and leave a note in which the priest confesses his sins, and then Rias kills him, making it look like murder. In the note, the young man will talk about his relationship with Lady Lurtella and the fact that the prophecy is actually false. To twist everything as the truth, it will be necessary to write that the priest was pushed to this step by the feeling of guilt, that he went against God. If the couple kills the man, then of course it will be easier because it will be over. However, it can't be that way. Nodding, the young man agrees. The one who kills the priest will face the punishment of the gods, which one would not want to receive. So the only thing left to do is not to interfere. Looking into her brother's eyes, the girl begs him to write just a couple of letters in his handwriting, because it will help her in another way. The young man nods. That would be enough, especially since the priest would remain completely calm. The conversation is interrupted by one of the servants who rushes to Rias to report something important. Something happened, so you have to go through to figure it out. The servants can't figure it out on their own, so it's the Duke who's needed. Smiling, the girl promises that everything will be fine. It seems something urgent, so she's just going to take a walk at this time. The lady advances farther into the deepest part of the garden. Too much has happened today, so there are no guards there to interfere. The girl walks to the edge of the lake, which reflects all the lights from the castle and the rooms around it. The view is worth it. The man quietly sneaks up behind her and grabs the woman, asking her to bear with him for just a moment. She has to go with him. Someone special wants to meet the protagonist, but Ursula does not share his desires. The girl stepped her heel on the young man's foot, who instantly bounced off, starting to squirm in pain from his leg. Already about to flee, the maiden is stopped again. The guy stands up, grabbing the beautiful hair, thus pulling the princess to him. The girl realizes that there is no way she can escape capture, so she grabs the jar that was in her pocket for emergencies. In the next second, the beauty opens the lid and pours the liquid directly onto her attacker's face and body. The man lets out a wild scream due to the contents reaching his skin. The empty can falls to the grass beside my feet. The heroine vividly removes the bandage from her mouth and with all her might slams it into the guy's face, who lets out another scream. The maiden pulls out her blade and strikes her opponent with all her might, asking who he is. There's anger in his eyes. The girl wants to find out who is the important person she was to be escorted to. She's about to throw another punch, but a voice stops her. It seems the girl needs the exact person who just arrived. A man dressed in white stands only a few feet away. Glaring at the maiden, he orders her to drop the dagger, and then an explanation will be given at once, to which a refusal is heard. The guy has no other choice. Gathering some white energy in his hand, he reaches for the man who is lying on the ground. Lifting the servant up, the man puts his palm to the area with the wound, which immediately begins to heal. The blonde woman backs away in horror. She hadn't seen something like this before, however it wasn't hard to remember where it came from. The white hair makes it clear everything that's going on. Smiling, the young man talks about how pleased he is to meet him and introduces himself as Azriel. His name doesn't say anything, so the next step is that he removes the hood from his head. The girl can't believe that this is exactly who she wanted to finish off at one point. He's standing right in front of her. White hair, worn only by those with divine power, as well as blue eyes and pale skin, are the card of the head of the temple, with whom even the emperor is forced to reckon. The guy seems to be talking, but it's worth asking what he's doing here. The priest treated him very rudely, so there was no point in brooding before him. Smiling, the blonde man talks about how he did it all just to meet the young lady. Holding out his palm, the young man fixes his hair, saying that it was completely disheveled during the battle. The voice is full of concern and admiration. The man gently strokes the pale face that is so different from the others. Leaning closer, Azriel asks if the maiden is frightened. The fear should have passed after he arrived at her place. Throwing back her palm, the girl picks up on the fact that the guy didn't just come for a chat, so he has to say what he wants. Nodding his head, the head says something he wants to discuss. That was the #1 reason he showed up here. No one knows anything about the head of the church. No one knows if he is a man or a woman or how old he is. The heroine never thought she would meet a blonde man under these exact circumstances, or that she would meet him at all. The garden is not the best place for discussion, so it's worth going a little further afield and finding a more appropriate setting. Refusing, the heroine demands an explanation as to why they tried to kidnap her. All this because maybe the guy just wanted to get to know the princess better. He tried to act quietly, but she was much stronger. For some reason, the priest thought that a princess who had spent her entire life in the palace would be much easier to kidnap, but that turned out not to be the case. There's no one around to stand up to the priest. Otherwise, if even a hair falls from his head, the hero will know very strong torment. If you show weakness, then you can easily be victimized, but the guy has absolutely no weakness. The key is to stay calm, so the maiden asks why the chapter hasn't sent her a meeting request. The young man wanted to dispense with the formalities, but the lady does not wish to repeat herself twice. If you have something to say, you need to be blunt. Sighing, the priest talks about how he doesn't care. The princess can behave as she pleases. You can't look away, but it feels very different than when the heroine looks into the prince's eyes. The young man seems to be judging with his gaze. Looking into the lady's eyes, the young man asks if she will be a new lady for him. If she's a child of prophecy, it doesn't make sense to refuse. The girl is sorry, but it's been a month since the prophecy changed, so Miss Lurtella is now the chosen one. Twirling the dagger the man took from the lady, the guy laughs. No one can believe what happened. It's easy to get hurt with this weapon if you make one wrong move. I can't believe Azriel is going so easy on him. A priest learned such a thing, someone not in the temple. The lady has heard that it is different from past ones, however not that much. By saying her firm yes, the maiden makes it clear that she truly believes that the prophecy has changed itself. Later, the opinion changed, and surely the young man is wondering why. She has a story to tell. The information that will be given will be to Azriel's liking, but in return wants to get something needed and well applied. The girl wishes for equally important information, to which the priest nods. He's agreeing to the deal. It's getting a little late, so the man says goodbye. The interviewee hopes that next time things won't start so harshly. Turning away, the guy swears it won't happen again, so you shouldn't worry so much. Smiling, the man wishes the lady good night. He holds out his palm, expecting the princess to follow the rules of etiquette. Getting what was expected, the blonde gently leans in and kisses the back of his palm. The man builds up a ball of energy in his hand and then holds it out towards the lady. His blessing will be as a sign of apology. The couple disappears from sight, leaving the maiden all alone in the garden. She's trying to realize all the things that have happened to her. The maid, who is taking the evening gown, notices the red stains with horror. As you can see, the princess is fine and uninjured. The girl was incredibly tired, for the day had been too full. She sends everyone to their rooms. My eyes close on their own, preventing me from focusing on anything else but sleep. Maiden puts her hand to her cheek with delight, noticing that it no longer hurts. Most likely, the healing came with a blessing. The hand that had to take the energy no longer glows, though it did for the first few minutes. The lady leans back on the bed. The priest who got hurt was also perfectly fine thanks to Azriel. The priest similarly took the dagger that was always in his pocket. Virgo is going to be a little different and preferably sharper. There is a noise outside the door, followed by a measured knock. Getting out of bed, the girl asks who arrived at such a late hour. Fixing her hair, the lady asks what happened. She's not a princess anymore, so there's no point in bothering her. A maid of honor appeared nearby, speaking of the prince's desire to meet the lady. He asked me to bring her to his room. It seems that words weren't enough, even if the heroine explained everything very clearly. Sighing heavily, the maiden agrees. If the words weren't clear, then I'll have to re-explain. The girl leads the former crown princess down the hallway. The lady had not been in the crown prince's room for a very long time. Now going to that very room, the heroine somehow remembered that she hadn't been there since she was notified of the breakup. There are too many memories in the castle, and so where you don't go, you can build a whole string of them. Glancing at the window in the hallway, the maiden remembers how it was exactly like this that they stood with the prince discussing some next book. The place seemed to attract the heroine even without any explanation. She steps closer while the woman behind her calls out to her. Turning away, the heroine nods. There's nothing there, so you don't need to fixate your attention. The guy's room was on that endless list as something special. I didn't even want to go in there. The maid of honor knocks, talking about bringing Ursula in. Every time she was here, something new came alive in her. Each time, my heart was ready to jump out of my chest, no matter how many different emotions were present. It was on the couches in the room that the boy did cute childish things, not at all peculiar to him, and also whispered sweet words. The little girl was definitely happy then because she loved it. However, even that had its price. The girl liked it when a guy called affectionately by name just the princess, and cooked all sorts of goodies, but now it didn't make sense. The man standing in a robe near the window doesn't even turn around. The lady coughs behind his back, indicating that she has been called. The young man turns around, asking the young lady to take a seat on one of the couches to talk. Dropping into the prepared seat, the lady asks why she was invited to the hall. She didn't want to go. Silence lingers in the room, which now seems like a particle of air in which everything hovers. The man didn't seem like he was going to speak, but even on this occasion the lady had an idea. She asks if the prince was at Lady Lurtella's. No response in return, but it seems the prince is unaware of Navia's relationship with the high priest, even if he knows it won't help him. The lady was still the same. She pretends she doesn't care about anything, even though deep down she has completely different feelings. It is the kind of face that shows the fact that the prince is now a mere shadow of former happiness. The lady freezes. He seems afraid of what he will say to Lady Lurtella, but it seems more absurd than real. Trying to move away, Ursula asks for her hand to be removed, to which she receives a strange response. The guy's not sure if he should do it. The lady asked for it, and it doesn't matter if the guy wants it or not. She won't say the same thing twice. Throwing back her fingers, thus causing anger, the lady asks His Highness to go back to his new lover. Dropping quite close, the guy confidently asks if it's true that she's still bothered by Navia. The lady keeps saying His Highness even while sitting alone with him in his own room. She seemed to be very hurt by what had happened. The lady is still thinking about the princess who took her place. It's no longer a question, but something else, because the young man turns to shouting. Glaring maliciously at Pisanthrius with his eyes, the man asks if she is going to leave the castle or if it was a fake. Trying not to give away her true emotions, the lady merely nods. This is no longer the place for her. It was the prince who gave the wish to do so, for he gave notice of the separation. There's nothing else to do on the estate, and no reason left to do it. Azriel didn't find answers to the other questions, but she answered this one quite willingly, which seems odd. The young man thought that by calling to his room he would get a different scenario of events, but it seems his hopes were not realized. For some reason, His Highness does such a cruel thing to the heroine, even though she doesn't deserve it. Turning away, the lady asks if that was all the prince wanted to say. Who called her? Pisantria is really fine despite the fact that the couple has long since separated. The response didn't live up to the hype either. The man has a right to ask such questions under the circumstances because, according to him, he is allowed absolutely everything. Smiling, the lady laughs. The guy says it's like he's with her and they love each other. This man is completely incorrigible. The guy turns away. He tells the lady that she can do as she sees fit, and this is the second time with that line. The lady can't take the whole show anymore because it's beyond her strength. All the accusations and the way the guy gets angry is infuriating, because Ursha has lived her whole life just for the prince. The lady bows her head and then speaks quietly about how she no longer needs His Highness. He doesn't deserve her love. The prince has changed his princess, but still wants his ex-passion to say she needs him. The heroine is pushing the hurt, but it's well-deserved. It was the young man who decided to break their relationship, so he should have no regrets. Even the prince himself has managed to forget this truth, so now he tries to implicate Pisantria, who is not guilty of anything. Blondie can make the case that it didn't happen, but the majority opinion is that a person with a short memory should not be trusted to run the country. No longer able to withstand such an onslaught, the young man turns sharply, shouting Urzia's name and her full surname. That is the lady's name, and she is the one who almost gave him her name and is also the ex-fiancé who was dumped. Virgo almost has one of the noblest surnames in the world, but she doesn't need it. Stepping back, the woman sighs disappointedly. She wasn't supposed to show her true emotions. The heroine does not want this, especially since nothing can be changed in the current situation. But there are no more forces to restrain themselves. The lady did everything that was asked of her without any slip-ups. She was trying to be someone the people would like. The lady did everything to become empress. Followed all the words, however, in the end, the prince simply broke the engagement. Turning around to say something else, the girl feels her hand being grabbed and pulled forward. If the man had been asked to reconsider once more, things would have been very different. He's sorry. A prince has no right to say something like that when he did that to a princess who didn't deserve it. The lady proved to be too cruel because she can end up telling everyone that she didn't even shed a single tear and just walk away. Smiling through her tears, the blonde remarks on how selfish the prince was and still is. Wiping the tears that are rolling down her face in hail, the lady turns around to run out of the room as fast as possible. The door closes with a slam, leaving the young man all alone in the empty room and Ursula leaning against the wall. The woman is trying to hold back her true emotions, but she's already shown them. There's no stopping the tears. Nothing will change, and that becomes immediately clear. His Highness will live a happy life with his new lady. Ursula, in turn, would be obliged to praise the couple who would become emperor and empress. It could have been a good scenario. However, the girl just can't leave it as it is without any revisions. Attention is drawn to the sound of the window sashes. The maiden turns around, hoping it's just the wind moving so noisily. Belle freezes because a priest has appeared at the window and has jumped into the room. He smiles. Dropping just a few steps away from the lay, the man speaks of having one very important conversation. The guy left so willfully, and now he's suddenly back, which makes you question it. He apologizes to his new lover. The guy looks at the pretty girl, extending his hand. He doesn't know what happened at Ursula's, but perhaps if he can comfort her, it might be possible to win the princess's heart. Taking her hand away, the beauty takes a few steps back. His Holiness is acting strangely. The young man wants to say something, but hesitates when he notices the red mark on the wrist of the young lady, who is standing directly across from him. A sad look examines her arm, which seems to need someone to heal, albeit a slight bruise. The man leans over his arm, quietly saying that it is unacceptable to treat the body of such a beautiful lady in such a manner. The heroine doesn't even try to object to anything, because a bright flash of energy takes away all the unspoken words. A smile immediately appears on the good-natured face. The blonde man is only glad that he was able to heal his beloved. Nodding, the lady gives thanks for what happened to her because she didn't expect to receive healing so soon. Smiling lightly, the young man says that everything is perfectly fine, and then apologizes again for barging into someone else's bedroom like that. Taking a second to notice the open door and window, the lady asks how the priest got into the room. The man turns to the window frame. Belle probably saw him climb in the window and jump off the sill. The heroine no longer has any idea what else this man is capable of. A normal person wouldn't climb that high. Chuckling, the chapter talks about the fact that there was a tree there, and even if that still seems like a pretty high mark, it was easy for him. The girl sighs heavily but promises she won't ask any more stupid questions. It's definitely a win. Still putting in what's being said, the pretty girl asks why the guy came here. Humming, the young man picks up on the fact that he thought the maiden would just kick him out or call the guards in that second. Taking note, the beauty promises that if he doesn't, the woman will immediately do it. Laughing, the blonde says what he thought about the chance of the princess staying on the throne and impressing everyone with her beauty. Instead of following the ordinal solution, the lady switched, thus leaving Azriel shocked. The maiden freezes, asking what is meant, but all she eventually sees in response is an outstretched hand in front of her. The boy was surprised when Ursha drew her sword and swung it at the priest's servant without a second thought. What had just recently happened was quite an impressive sight, despite how the servant felt afterward. The lady is too tired, so as she steps back, she talks about how she didn't need to get in the room just for the sake of it. There is something more important, which is why the man came this late in the evening. The wind from the end makes the maiden shrink. The guy instantly moves closer and removes his cloak, throwing it over his lover's shoulders. He had the real reason after all. Azriel came to possess the princess. My mouth opens on its own in surprise. Belle stares mindlessly at her interlocutor, trying to understand and accept what is being said. Guy sees that Pysantria is lonely and ill. He wishes he could be there to wipe away the tears and then be the one to get the heart. From the beginning, it seemed to the hero that the blonde was too weak to be alone, but now it is clear that this is not the case. The heroine looks down at the floor, trying to find the right and proper words for the situation. The man thought he finally had one, however it seems he was simply mistaken, so he got ready to leave the manor. The lady asks if that was a warning. The guy is able to kidnap her whenever he wants, as well as come into the room whenever he wants. There were almost no other reasons, for the young man had asked her attitude, which had not changed. This warning was for him as well. A smile spreads across the guy's face. His expectations were wrong because now things had completely changed. The imperial family locked Pysantria in a castle, so the young man thought that the maiden was a little bird who knows nothing. However, it turned out to be the opposite. Apparently, the priest thinks the heroine is a young lady who knows nothing in this life, which seems ridiculous. For some reason, Azriel thought it was the prince who was the only talented person in the castle. However, the lady was not so simple either. It was about the crown prince, and that was a topic the beautiful girl didn't really want to talk about. There is no denying that when you look at the path the young man had to take, it becomes clear how beautiful it is. Everyone around knows that the empire has flourished thanks to the rule of His Highness the Emperor. Taking a seat on the bed, the man is about to say something else. However, the lady talks about how it's all to her credit. If this is true, it becomes unclear why it was done and what the motive was. The maiden was forced to do certain things to take the place of the empress in the future and become an exemplary ruler. For some reason, the beauty starts to feel very sleepy, which seems highly suspicious. She was sure she could stay up for 2 nights. Dropping his hand to the top of the head of Ursia sitting next to him, the guy talks about how unfair it was. The lady sighs. She doesn't want to think about something like that anymore because it makes her upset. Everything that had happened had taught Pysantria a good lesson. None of this means she's going to let anyone do that to her again. The guy quietly takes note of the fact that the lady has been looking tired for a long time, and therefore has every right to go to sleep in a soft bed. Everything in front of my eyes is double and blurry, probably because the mage's clothes exude some kind of power. Gently lifting the girl up, the guy tucks her into bed, carefully covering her with a soft blanket. Already almost through a dream, the blonde is talking about how things containing magic should be registered as a national treasure. The imperial palace doesn't run a temple. especially since such a young lady shouldn't have to worry about such things. Now the beauty will never get the place of empress, for it is finished just as it should be. That's why the monk can take the girl with him. It sounds more like a question, but no answer is heard. The princess calls out, to which she lazily opens her eyes to see her interlocutor again. If the couple's thoughts strongly converge, then the young man would want to pick up his beloved right on the very same day. Touching the hood of her cloak, Azriel contemplates the fact that she could shed her clothes right now. The girl doesn't want to show such a bad side of herself, so she'll leave it as it is. She doesn't feel like taking off her cloak. Smiling, the man looks at the princess. It makes her want to sing a lullaby and put her to sleep and then cuddle her. Putting his hand right on the girl's forehead, the guy tries his best to make sure she finally gets some rest. They'll definitely see each other again. There is another scuffle outside the temple. An aide holds up a man who he says was one of the men who lured the student priests to get information out of them about the temple. A face full of sarcasm and betrayal looks directly at the man, who already regretted everything he had done. It's probably best to just finish off the brunette who dared to cheat despite inhibitions. The guy has almost had time to cry, but he is told that there will be an opportunity to save his life because the guys plan to go after his boss. There's only one plan, so once the servants find out about the customer, you should still finish off the person who got caught. The maid of honor who was standing behind suddenly notices something unusual. The priest lacks the cloak he normally wears. Turning around so that you can see the smile on his face, the guy talks about how he just gave it to the princess. The woman freezes, interestedly interjecting what she has managed to hear. It seems absurd what has been said. Bowing her head, the lady listens to questions about whether she is coping with His Holiness's assignment. Hearing a positive answer, the young man walks off into the distance to the temple, nodding his approval as he goes. What is happening is disrespectful to the princess, but the lady should be grateful for saving her child. What the young man is asking for is a mere trifle compared to the happy life of the little one who will now get it. A woman has to betray her favorite mistress, thereby undermining her trust and watching her every move, but it's worth it. Morning had long since come, but that didn't mean the lady had gotten a good night's sleep. She slowly opens her sleepy eyes. Getting up to sit on the bed, Azriel picks up on the fact that, for some reason, she feels too good. Her attention shifts to the cloak, which falls from her shoulders in a light fan right into her hands. Looking closer, the heroine swoons at the snow-white thing, the temple patterns right on the silver ribbon. Memories swirl in my head. The beauty couldn't remember too much, but the words were a blur. Nervously running her eyes from side to side, the beauty looks around. She couldn't believe that what had happened wasn't just a silly dream that seemed unreal. Ura Pantri for the first time lost the trained vigilance she usually possessed without any problems. Previously, the girl had done some investigation about the high priest, but all that had been realized was that it was extremely difficult to find information about him. The young man's divine power is too warm and pleasant to touch, so the beauty can't tear herself away. Having felt warmth just once, the lady doesn't want to forget him, which means she'll have to be around him almost all the time. The morning was already in full swing, so the maiden was going about her business, stopping only for a moment to look out the window, behind which the sun was shining. The maids who arrived in the room chirped happily about bringing the right accessories. I couldn't believe that this jewelry was sent by the young lady's mother. It was completely out of her style, which was out of line. Mom had promised she would do something like this, however, it was beyond the bounds of reason. She's not the kind of person who would just give gifts. Trying on pieces that have been sent, the lady listens to advice on how beautiful the necklace will look to match her eye color or pale skin, which is lovely. Anything sent by the Duchess would be the envy of other girls from noble families. The servants' attitudes had changed in just a few days, but it would be more accurate to say that things were back to normal. The girls who now bustled around were the ones who had turned their backs on the princess when the prophecy changed. It's not so important anymore because the lady is interested in looking at her reflection. It's hard to imagine a more enchanting woman. One of the maids offers honey that was brought from the Principality of Luster, and another says something about mines and stones. The stone, which had just recently been discovered, was precisely precious, so the beauty wanted to give it as a gift as a token of gratitude. The princess smiles. She will be grateful for any of the gifts that can be given to her. Changing the subject but not going too far, the lady brings up the fact that the gem from the mine was what they wanted to give to Lurtella. No one understands what the maiden wanted to say, but only beautiful people should have jewelry. It was recently reported that a precious red stone was found in the Pavluna estate. However, the Count hid the fact that he discovered it a year ago to make money. The estate decided to make 2 beautiful tiaras. One of them, of course, would be reserved for the Empress. Another tiara will be given specifically to the princess, causing her to flap her eyes in surprise. Since even ancient times, jewelry, and even more so tiaras with red jewels, have been a feature of royalty. The blonde, still twirling around the heroine, quietly asks if the beauty would accept such a gift in her honor. Nodding, the maiden agrees, causing her friend to light up with the bright light of joy that was hidden within. The family's artisans put a lot of effort into making everything look its best. The lady agrees, but now she should rest. The girls obediently agree and leave the room. A strange feeling does not leave Ursia because there is something strange there. Lady Lurtella had become something of a taboo in social circles, but that gave no reason to treat Pysantria properly. If you looked closely at the jewelry that was passed around, you could tell that it wasn't sent by the Duchess. The jewelry was not the style of the girl's mother. It can't be that the imperial family just abandoned the child of prophecy. Belle follows to the garden, where Ash is already waiting for her. She'd like to find out what happened. The guy and the lady have been seen too often lately, and if they are spotted, they're both in trouble. Next time she promises to wear a brooch. Ash nods in agreement. The piece is beautiful and perfect for a young lady, so it will mark the meeting place. Guy has been very busy lately, but the lady is going to go horseback riding this afternoon so he can rest. Trying to object, the servant assures him that he's perfectly fine, so he doesn't need a day off. Bowing his head, the young man recognizes that it is the least he can do for the Duchess who has always been there for him. The man apologizes for not being able to find more information about Navia and the High Priest, but the lady speaks of having instructed her father to do so. What I wanted to know before was no longer of as much interest. The lady wants to find out about any rumors that may have surfaced recently. The man freezes. He tries to remember exactly what he was able to hear. Rumors tend to spread from the lowest to the highest, so the heroine's father put Asha in a lowly position. Court ladies are acting strange. Despite everything that happened, it's as if they once again consider Ursia the crown empress. The brunette bows his head and speaks quietly about how he got something, but he didn't speak because he wasn't sure. Rumors began to spread that the high priest had chosen the princess as the next saint to the throne. There are 2 concepts in the world. One thing is when a saint is a person of power, helping and caring for the safety of the people around them. The second meaning is that she is the wife of the Holy Father who rules all around. He has more privileges. If an ordinary monk wants to marry, he cannot do so as it is forbidden, but a priest can change that. Ash can't believe what happened, but the bottom line is that it means it's likely that Azriel wants to make the lady his wife. It seems that the priest himself is the one who spread the rumor, but the servant continues to offer options to distract the public. The lady turns to Asha again. He shouldn't think about such rumors, which would only make him nervous. Soon the heroine will meet the man in person and ask everything. It's worth getting into the mindset of turning things around now. Maybe it was the parents who started the rumor, but that's impossible. Anyway, this is not official information, so no harm to the maiden. Compared to the status of the abandoned former crown empress, it's even better for the image. Ash addresses the princess, talking about how she has absolutely no divine power, to which she nods because it's true. A man can't think of it that way. Any way you look at it, it all seems wrong. I chose her for no reason at all. It's always been someone purely in the political interest to be elected to such a high place, so maybe it makes sense. During what is going on, getting married is very rare, much less for love. The brunette bows his head, saddened that he no longer wishes to see mistress held hostage to a marriage not for love. The girl froze. It seemed to her that marrying the crown prince was not something against her own wishes. The whole truth is that over time the heroine just started to take it for granted. She didn't care what she wanted. Originally, the maiden only wanted to take a seat next to the future emperor, even if it didn't work out in the end. The woman reassures Asha, "It's just a rumor. They are not the truth, just something that compliments the people around them." The man quietly asks if mistress wants to handle everything alone. It's important for him to see if the lady knows a single way to do it. Moving closer, the beauty fixes the hair of the interlocutor. This conversation seems pointless because there's nothing to change anyway. It's okay, because the young man says it's all just because he's worried sick. Dropping onto the princess's shoulder, the guy asks that she take care of herself first and foremost, and then the rest of us. Taking a few steps back, Ash nods. He doesn't want to appear weak because he's in perfect health. What he does is work. The princess nods in agreement, but asks to report back if he gets too difficult. Health is also very important. Her father said nothing, but Ursia was more than certain that several more spies had gotten into the palace. The man straightens up. It's not hard for him, but he promises he'll do his best to make things better. The brunette was unable to help, and because of this is only forced to watch the princess from afar. It makes the cat scratch at my heart. The diva thanks Asha for it comes from the bottom of her heart. He objects, because there is nothing he can do from somewhere far away that is not true. When the Duchess first arrives at the unfamiliar castle, Ash arrives with her and has no idea how much help he's been. If it weren't for the young man's character, the princess would have been a very different person, but things have changed. The brunette assures that he understands everything, even without extra words. The princess would have arrived at the princess status she was in without him. The Duchess smiles, for once again expressing her sincere gratitude to the man who saved her. The guy comes closer and coughing talks about how he only lives for the princess. She can use it as much as she likes. The servant is so devoted to his mistress that he is willing to give his life for her, ultimately regretting nothing. The Duchess steps closer, asking not to be talked about. It wasn't what she wanted to hear from a loyal man. The people in the Duke's residence would be surprised to see the young man in such a state. Many wondered if Ash had emotions because he did everything like a robot. Guy hopes the princess never sees the sorrow, sadness, and hardship she doesn't deserve. The young man never wanted the heroine to shed her precious tears, which no one deserves. Just because Ursia doesn't cry in front of her subordinates doesn't mean she doesn't have a full-on hurricane going on inside. A smile spreads across his face all by itself. The girl will have nothing more to say than thank you. Asha said he would always obey the Duchess, so today she orders him to get some rest. As she's leaving, the lady remembers something. She asks not to be surprised, but she's going to be kidnapped in about a couple days. There's a lady knocking on the door who doesn't want to wake up someone who has probably been up late, however she has to. She should pass on what Asha said. A rustle is heard outside the door, making it clear that the owner of the room has finally woken up. Stepping inside the room, the heroine realizes that the guy never woke up. She walks over to the window and opens the curtains. Turning toward the bed, the Duchess only notices the top of her blonde hair, which is slightly visible. Sitting down next to the body, which is wrapped in a blanket, the maiden asks her brother to wake up because he knows she is already here. The young man sits up on the bed saying that he is happy to see Sia, however definitely not this early. Smiling lightly, seeing a sleepy face, the heroine is told that the high priest visited her last night. The guy freezes. He hadn't expected to hear something like that since this morning because it seemed more like absurdity. The couple never got to talk, even though the man talked about how he definitely had something to tell the princess. Being alone with a stranger can be dangerous, especially when you don't know what kind of person they are. He could have sent a request to socialize. Judging by the man's reaction, he'd better not say what happened next. The heroine fell asleep right next to Azriel. Tea was set on the table, so the couple moved there. The maiden narrated what kind of person he was, for the man appeared to be the same age as his brother. Aside from the age categories, the guy seems pretty impressive despite his credentials. It seems that Azriel is quite dangerous because he is quite different from those before him in the temple. The blonde man snickered. In his opinion, those before him were rather incompetent. Usually the high priests are quite lenient and kind. With few exceptions, they are capable of reprimand and are not particularly social. The head is always afraid of becoming hateful to someone. Such people are among the few who have power and are not allowed to use it. You can't take your eyes off the guy, and the brother believes it because up until that point everything was fine and business as usual. After listening to Asha's story, the maiden realized that it was impossible to be lenient, especially since there were rumors that he wanted to make the princess a saint. No one understands what Azriel is trying to accomplish with this, but it seems like a statement that he wants to take a lady as his wife. Only one fact can be confirmed and said for sure. The maiden likes the priest very much, judging by his actions. This is what will be great to take advantage of, and then flip to the flip side. Ursia was formerly the crown princess of the imperial palace. She became a most noble lady. Moreover, she had a fine pedigree. The lady had only one flaw. She was abandoned at the altar, leaving her completely alone, unwanted by anyone after all she had done. Now rumor has it that the priest wants to make her his wife, so this would be a great chance to remove the stigma of abandonment. At this point, both in political views and in general, the man can't find a better candidate. The conversation pauses, and then the lady suddenly tells her brother that she will need his help. "I need help with a kidnapping." Such words made the man choke on his tea and cough. Holding out the napkin, the lady smiles as usual, saying that the crown prince will do it very soon. If the young man does kidnap the princess and imprison her in a dungeon, a fourth squad of knights will watch over her. There are some interesting guys among this squad, which is exactly what Blondie will be able to help with. Already about to continue talking about the kidnapping, the lady freezes because Rias rises from his chair. The blonde looks at his sister carefully, asking why she suddenly thought she was going to be kidnapped. If the heroine had been in the prince's shoes, she would have kept someone like her to herself. That's an assumption, but a man can be pushed to do that. The only way to imprison the princess is to accuse her of a crime and then start luring her to your side. First of all, there should always be a couple people around the princess. The right people have already started the rumors. Recently, in a kingdom, a prince imprisoned a commoner who did not reciprocate his love. The guy's eyes light up. He can't believe his sister decided to take such a step, thus trying to do everything on purpose. In fact, even the heroine herself didn't want to start all this. But there was also a reason to check something out quickly. The guy sighs heavily. He had absolutely nothing to say to Ursia's words, but he realized one thing. Obviously, the sister doesn't even plan on returning to the Duke's mansion, at least not this time. Belle nods. She doesn't know for sure yet, but for some reason she thinks it's best for everyone. The man talks about refusing to help, to which he is asked what he would do. He can't apologize for anything, and if the sister wants to stay, that's her choice. The Duchess doesn't want to leave her affairs to others, thus burdening the already heavy burden they have to carry on their backs. Pysantria was originally meant to bring stability and security to the Empire, but now its task has changed. The girl has an obligation to set things right in the kingdom, but according to her brother, it's not all that important. If she wanted to come back, she would have come back a long time ago. Initially, the heroine planned it this way because she took the breakup as God's will. If it's someone else's plan, then the maiden won't put up with it. After all, she had been dishonored and deposed. It was probably Lady Lurtella. The man tries to change his mind to the last. If the princess returned to the palace now, she would have the perfect opportunity to rest from everything while her brother took care of the problems. If the girl leaves, no one will say anything to her. If it's gotten that far, then the young man can't object. The woman had always loved her brother for his understanding. Rias never tried to interfere, but remained persistent. The final answer is that the beauty has no intention of returning to the Duke's estate. Sitting at the table, Beauty ponders the meaning of the word vacation. She's been running around her whole life. Ursia realized that she shouldn't have been in such a pitiful state, but on the throne. The heroine simply resigned herself to such a burden, for the same was true when the lady began to conduct the emperor's affairs on behalf of their family. It was considered a kind of debt. The next step was to help the crown prince build his standing in society and the trust of others. At the same time, Alfredo was also trying to do his best. He's been through a lot. The victory was definitely for the crown prince. Venice could only escape death by renouncing the imperial family. From then on, the boy went into battle with Rias and the rest of the knights to save himself, while the heroine helped the exhausted crown prince. It was incredibly hard for the blonde, but she never thought about resting, realizing everything only after the guy's words. Ever since she was a little girl, she always wanted to come home, and even if it was once a year, it was a special occasion. Now, when the girl thinks about the past, she is completely unable to understand what it was that prohibited her from visiting her parents' home. It didn't seem strange before. Attention was diverted by a voice at the door asking if it was okay to come in and being granted permission. The ladies of the palace walk right up to the table itself saying that a letter has arrived to be read. The high priest had personally written a paper setting up a meeting that it would be good to take some time for. It had been a whole week and the lady thought the man would make an appointment sooner. The cloak she decided to bring with her. It's a shame to part with the warmth of a soft robe. Over the past few days, the maiden had had time to get used to him. It's not something that money can buy, even if the lady would like to do it. I need to come to my senses. Quickly filling something out, the beauty holds out the paper to the maiden, asking that she give it to the supreme head. The girls on their way out start whispering. Scraps of phrases come through, but what is heard is that they now want to tell everyone that the rumors are true. Just as the lady thought, rumors are already running rampant around the palace, even if many don't know who Azriel is. The festival is just around the corner too, so you should prepare for that too to make sure everything goes wonderfully. The feast of the founding of the empire is the same day that the temple played an important role. The priest's identity is shrouded in mist, but he will soon have to reveal himself. It's no lie that the heroine herself thought she would only find out the truth at the festival, but it turned out otherwise. The maiden would never have thought that Azriel was the head of the temple. He's too young and his character doesn't really fit. At this point, there are more people to worry about than a man. The girl had broken up with the prince on the day of the gala and thought he would soon want it all back, but it was even better this way. Anxiety was taking over the mind a bit. I don't want the young man to make excuses for his rude behavior that night. There is complete silence in the office. No one is confusing or interfering with the work. Leaning back in her chair, the lady sighs contentedly. She loves silence more than anything. Virgo wanted to send a letter to her parents, but it may not be safe, as she has no one reliable sender. If the Duke had wanted to, he would have found a way to get in touch himself. We need to enjoy the quiet and relaxation. Rias left too because he was off to an audience with His Highness, which meant even more joy. It had been a very long time since Ursula had been completely alone. She could just read a book because she wasn't making time for herself. A knock at the door interrupted the idyll. The heroine couldn't believe that someone was back, but she says it's okay to come in. The door slowly opens and Alfredo appears from there. He looks a little worried. The girl quietly asks what's wrong, to which the guy finds no reason. He just wanted to be with the beautiful girl. There is no way the lady can say no to her brother who has always remained so good. The young man's gaze flickered to the library. Apparently, my sister wanted to read and was going to find something appropriate. Lighting up with joy, the brunette offers to recommend something, even if the last book read was called History of the Empire. The guy asks about the novels, but the maiden shakes her head. She didn't want to read a book where the ladies get embroiled in love stories. Calling out to look for something, Alfredo heads inside. The library is sure to have something interesting. Venetia searches for books on the lowest shelf, while Ursula watches in surprise, for she has never looked for stories there. Taking out the edition, the young man points out the fact that he hasn't read it himself, but he thinks it's a good one by the title. Belle examines the cover, then laughs quietly. The book should definitely be a good fit for her. Alfredo holds up a thing called Secrets with a Teacher, which he says is perfect for the content. Overflowing with color, the young man starts waving his hands around, saying that he didn't mean to get this particular one, to which the lady promises that she will definitely read it. Taking the book, the lady makes Alfredo try to retrieve it, but ends up stumbling and falling. She's being picked up by a guy. Picking up the beauty and stopping her, the man asks if she's okay, to which she nods. Apologizing once more, the young man repeats once more that he wanted to get the other one. These ridiculous situations are becoming like a hobby for Venice. The boy looks happy, but changes the subject, asking if his sister hurt herself. The lady offers to pick up the thing and read it in the morning, but the guy shrinks from it, saying that she won't like the content. Something catches the beauty's attention, so, asking the boy to wait, she swings open a window with a bird on the window frame. Looking at the chick Ursula had been waiting for, she smiles. He will always be a good guest. Lighting one of the candles, the lady unfolds a piece of paper and holds it up to the fire. Rumors spread even in the Duke's domain. They check the credibility because the father has eyes and ears everywhere. The investigation is unlikely to succeed even so, because we're talking about the head of the temple. Almost reaching the end, Belle notices the handwriting of her mother, who seems to have something to say as well. The lady knows her daughter's predicament and still asks for the impossible. She wants the princess to find a book with records of aristocrat corruption. The book is in the Imperial Library, which can only be accessed by members of the family to which the lady is no longer a member. This publication outlines all the bribes, corruption, and how it was covered up. It even contains the sins of the imperial family. It was strange why the maiden would want this book, for she had no intention of attaining any information. Thoughts are whirling around in her head because there are tons of options to use, but the girl is interrupted. Alfredo appeared in the doorway, picking up on the fact that his companion had not returned for a long time. The lady had been gone longer than she thought. A plan pops into my head that can only be realized with the help of Venice. There is a book that Beauty is interested in, so she asks to find what she needs to learn about. The book Ursula wants to read is in the Imperial Library, where all access is denied. Reaching out and interlocking her fingers, Beauty asks for her help as she can no longer go in there. Frowning, the brunette reminds him that he has no right to take books out of the Imperial Library. Lowering her sad gaze to the floor, the blonde reminds herself that this is an edition she's wanted to read for a long time. The hand goes down, and the voice with a note of pity says how the lady was hoping for help just this once. Grasping his palm again, Alfredo shouts out, "No!" He doesn't want to miss the opportunity that's been thrown his way. Igniting desire, the boy promises that he will bring anything to make the maiden happy. The girl nods. She thanks the young man, realizing that at least the matter of her mother's request is now resolved. Finally, everyone went back to the palace. It had been a week since the banquet, which had dragged on interminably. Turning to her sister, Rias noted what she had said about wanting to stay, even though nothing had changed in the end. Nodding, the girl also talks about the planned visit to the temple that was scheduled for today. This is not a situation where the heroine can just go back to the Duke's house. An epidemic has returned to the Earl's estate, on its way to the Duke's. Freezing with horror, the heroine asks what happened. It must have been something serious. Rias is not susceptible to the disease, but Beauty had better not go as it is dangerous there. Every second one dies, so the Empire must have sent help. It's not known if it's an old disease or a new one. The Duchess is interrupted because the flow of words seems unstoppable. It's become a habit. The estate was closed, but the Emperor refused to give any support. Rias looks at her sister sadly, as if to let her know that there isn't much need for explanation here, given what happened earlier. If you think about it, the Count has always been at odds with the Emperor, because he did a lot of bad things. Their family had always produced worthy priests, but the Emperor was completely different. Now it becomes clear that the prince doesn't want the lady to get into the duchy, since they have withdrawn their support. Not a bad way to show His Majesty's true power. They don't want Ursha to get home, but even so, she can send a warning. I can't believe the guy will continue to pretend he's going to guard the temple in question. Everything is exactly as it seems at first glance, because this is that rare case. The maiden is going to the temple for a meeting today. All the aristocrats who have heard about it are extremely interested, so they say they are coming in an endless stream. Rias hums, but suggests that instead of staying in the palace, they move to the Duke's mansion in the capital. Nodding, the maiden confirms his hunch. The situation is heating up, so it's best to sit this one out for a while. The young man is not going to sit idle either, so very soon he wants to start looking for employees. The rumors about the chapter and the princess became the most talked about. It couldn't help but get interesting whether the priest would make a saint out of someone who had been abandoned by the oracle. The maiden was eager to know what would happen at the meeting, but had no way of guessing anything, so she promised to tell him when she got back home. There was no response from the prince's side, and even though he was calling to meet, nothing came up because of schedules. It is strange that the young man has left his former fiancée alone. However, perhaps he is just keeping an eye on the situation in the castle. On the one hand, Mistress of Prophecy Lurtella made one terrible mistake, but that wasn't the worst of it. The oracle had rejected the former heiress to the throne for some reason, so the situation itself was gaining frantic momentum. In the eyes of the people, the maiden was chosen by the head of the temple. After the banquet, Navia kept her head down. Thanks to the girl hiding, it was easier for the protagonist to investigate her relationship. Perhaps thoughts were now occupied with whether or not Ursula should be returned to the imperial palace or not after all. It is quite possible that this is true, but it is becoming obvious that the family does not want the lady to be taken by the temple. The heroine has given a lot to the imperial family, trying for the greater good so they won't want to lose her. The easiest thing for the emperor to do would have been to make the princess the wife of the second Prince Alfred, who was almost her age. His hand gripped the cup with force so it crunched. Obviously was too fragile, so that's an excuse. If a man wants to intimidate the princess and the prophecy girl, he may well use a similar method. Lurtella, as the heiress from the prophecy, will bring security and tranquility to the world. The Duchess, on the other hand, in her time as the prince's wife, will use the abilities and devote herself fully to the empire. For His Majesty, this is the most ideal scenario imaginable. If it is, as Sister said, then Brother is sure that it will become very difficult to become a saint. Asking the young man if he will go with her to the temple, the maiden rises. He says no because he has other things to do. The guy hasn't been to the capital for a long time, so he has some things to finalize. When my brother returns, he should bring a small dagger. My father used to send it before, but it was thrown away with other unnecessary things. I didn't want to mention the truth. The blonde nods. He knows a great craftsman, so he'll place the order as soon as possible. To all of this, the beauty didn't have the right uniform that was comfortable. Interrogating his sister, the young man tries to understand why she wants the uniform and what exactly she means. Turns out the carriage broke down recently, so we'll have to ride a horse. The dress doesn't fit. It can't be helped, so we'll have to go with the exports provided by His Majesty. The heroine realizes that this is the only way she can get anywhere, but decides to go first to be the one. Taking something out of his pocket, the prince holds out a blade wrapped in a dark leather sheath. This thing belongs to Rias, but he can use other weapons as well. No one knows what could happen to my sister out there. It would have been nice to bring Ash with me, but in the end that opportunity doesn't present itself. If there is such a concern, they should have included a servant in the escort on horseback to keep watch at all times. That's what the prince wanted to do, but they said the duchies didn't need the people because they had already chosen everyone. They change knights every month because they're afraid the princess will bribe them. There was no choice, so the only thing left to do was to prepare for the trip, which was to take place very soon. The brother carefully puts the necklace around her neck to emphasize the heroine's beauty. The day that was going to happen was today, so it was necessary to get everything under control. Asking about finalizing preparations, the blonde asks that everything be taken care of while she's at the temple. Accepting the beauty's hand, the man sighs heavily. You can tell he's worried in a way he hasn't been worried before. The escort that has already been chosen is standing next to the horses just outside the palace entrance on the side. The people who are a few meters away from the princess are the eyes and ears of the emperor, which is disconcerting. It seems that 14 people are too many to accompany the duke's daughter to the temple. At first glance, it seems like the emperor cares, but he doesn't. A man with blue hair steps forward, bowing carefully. His name is Hiram Matilda, and he is a chaperone. This deputy from the squad seems unreliable, but gathering her wits, Belle asks her brother to go about his business. Beauty will be perfectly fine for as long as she is confident in her defense. Looking into his sister's eyes, Rias asks to escort him to the palace exit so he can leave the place. People around me are whispering. Obviously, the aristocrats would ingratiate themselves with the princess again after seeing this scene. Turning to Ursia, the guy asks her to stay close to Hiram for her own safety. Looking into Sia's eyes, he asks what is in such confidence in being safe around him. This guy is the kind of guy that the Duchess has to please. It becomes noticeable almost immediately. Getting on the horse to Matilda, the girl orders the horse to move, so the horse gallops down the path into the distance. Just before leaving, Rias called out to Hiram to give him personal instructions. The guy asked to break away from the rest of the guards and guard his sister to the last to keep her safe and sound. The blonde tried to object to something, but he was interrupted, just asking for the same thing once more as if it was important. The man trusts the guard, so he leaves his sister to him. The rest of the knights look worse. Nodding accordingly, the young man promises that he will do his best and exactly as he has been ordered. Sia herself didn't know that. Almost covering her eyes from fatigue, the heroine considers the trees. She would finally be able to talk to the priest. The conversation will be about the important things we haven't been able to talk about in so long. Since the road was extremely boring, the Duchess asks Hiram if he knows her brother. They've sparred a few times. That was basically all they did together, so there was no point. The people around here are keeping it down, discussing Lady Pysantria and the others right beside the road. You have to put on a cape if it's uncomfortable. A little girl in the crowd waves hello. It seems to be the only person without bad intentions. The princess smiles and waves back. She doesn't want to appear angry, so she doesn't mess it up. The little girl's mom lights up with a smile just as the baby does and lifts her daughter in her arms to see more. This trail leads the horse to a forest road, so Matilda asks permission to speed up. The lady will be returning with her brother, so requests a separate horse. It's good to see people, but by sitting behind the knight's back, the maiden is damaging her reputation. Just as the heroine thought, it would be necessary to ride back on horseback. But now they had arrived at the temple. The knights standing at the entrance thrust their spears forward, forcing the couple to stop, just as the horse did. Matilda feels angry, but doesn't have time to say anything because he is pushed back by the princess. The men standing nearby immediately stew because they realize exactly who is standing in front of them. Quickly apologizing, they open the gate to the temple, saying that they did not immediately recognize the arriving guest. The color of the hair, which was visible from miles away, indicates the heroine's high status. The maiden left the palace only once with the undercover prince, but a great fuss was made around them then, and they were forbidden to leave. Hair was a hindrance to everything because it was noticed, but at times like this it was a privilege. Walking to the inside of the palace, the lady follows the corridor forward, leaving the knight behind her to be first. The people around are proving how much they respect the Duchess who has arrived at the temple. Before the girl became the crown princess and the new mistress of the prophecy, the temple and the palace were on bad terms. Matilda escorts the beauty almost all the way to the door, and then promises that he will go and do what he promised to do earlier. When left alone with the priests, the maiden talks about how pleased she is to meet them. Bowing his head, the young man talks about how they were all waiting together for the princess to arrive. The temple was originally white and clean, without a single piece of jewelry that almost never appeared over time. Turning around to ask the princess for her opinion, the guy also adds that all the changes were made by His Highness. The place was for the worship of a god, so it had to exude sincerity without ulterior motives. Looking at the sculptures and figures that were displayed in the hallway, one couldn't help but agree that it was truly beautiful. Interrupting the tour, which has gotten a little long, the priest points to a door to go through. In the room on the sofa, which was just as white, sits the head of the room, who is smiling, happy to meet you. Walking forward, the lady bows, saying that she has come at the call of heaven. Saying hello back is also supposed to be the right thing to do, so the man responds in kind. Sitting down, the beauty reminds them that they are not strangers, and thus there is no need for such formality. It's true, but the girl still has a lot to say, so the guy is all ears. Looking at the young man, the lady asks why he decided to spread such rumors. Not understanding the problem, the guy asks if the heroine liked this sort of thing. The rumor that the head had spotted the girl had the imperial family in an uproar. Also, along with what happened was the restoration of Ursia's honor, which was not something she had hoped for. Smiling, Azriel asks if the Duchess is satisfied, but the Duchess tries to keep her face straight, lest she be caught. The man offers to do the same in the future. She won't regret choosing him. The priest says it's all just for the princess, but remains a one-sided opinion because no one asks the Duchess herself. The man wonders how come a lady like that has been living as a puppet all this time. Frowning her eyebrows, the heroine bluntly asks what is being said about her. The meeting didn't go according to plan from the start. Apparently, the lady doesn't behave the way the chapter wants her to, so he shows it by example. The lady also needs to stand her ground, so as she rises, she talks about leaving if the man keeps this up. The guy's hand stops the heroine, placing his warm palm right on top. Looking into the eyes of the young lady, the guy notices that she is in too much of a constant hurry to get somewhere, even if she has no reason to do so. The smile appears completely unnoticed. It's nice to know that a man needs Ursia as much as she needs him. In that case, the princess might be more magnanimous. They'll get rid of the unnecessary stuff and get to the important stuff. The blonde nods in agreement. He has no motive to end the meeting either. The girl wanted to tell something urgent that applied to both of them, so it was worth getting to the main point. Nodding, the blonde is once again convinced that it's not worth talking about something else when there's already no time. Starting the same tune again, the young man asks if the beautiful girl has thought about becoming his. Even if there is no divine power, the mere fact that a saint exists has great symbolic meaning. Like the chapter, the lady only shows her face on holidays. Speaking of this, it can be understood that the young man is asking the lady to be his wife, but there is another meaning to it. The rumor that the maiden would become a saint may have turned out to be true, rather than the usual throw-in to help the princess. For the overwhelming number of aristocrats in the empire, marriage was a kind of deal they didn't want to break. The deal is usually viewed by two parties, so the lady doesn't know how to act or what to say if she says no. The heroine can't respond properly because then there's just no problem. The beauty still has options, but it looks like the blonde has taken all the initiative. When the opponent takes the initiative, you need to do an even better job of hiding your weaknesses and not giving them away. The lady gathers her thoughts and asks His Holiness if he understands the significance of the maiden. There was no way the blonde didn't know the ins and outs of what he was about to set up himself. The princess says this because she thinks the young man is overlooking the significance of the act. The saint's seat was still not an official position and was always vacant unless something important happened. The priest, on the other hand, is going to put the former bride of the crown prince of the castle in such an important seat. Nodding again, the man indicates that he is well aware of this. He doesn't need any reminders. Ura Pantri lost all the moves she had saved. His gaze slips to the floor. If things go the way they are now, then Leva will be obligated to bend the knee to her ex-fiancé. Miss Lurtella, on the other hand, climbs the road that the heroine has paved by her own efforts. The maiden will also be obliged to bow her proud head to the heir, who, frightened by the changes from the oracle, broke off all arrangements. If a lady agrees to marry a priest, however, she will have the status of not having to bow the knee to the man who used her. If the blonde can give something like that without anything in return, it should be more than enough. Bowing her head, the lady thinks about something, just not for a second, and then asks about a question swirling around in her subconscious. The man must get something in return, because there are far more desirous for the place of the partner of the head of the church than there are for the place of the empress. Even the emperor is cautious about this position. A man with this status doesn't need to fulfill duties as an empress, and the best option for the people is to follow the church. So the man agrees to this. Even turning over the entire empire, or even looking in other countries, it would be difficult to find such a person. The current head of the church doesn't seem incompetent, but for some reason wants to accomplish something else. The guy hums. He doesn't know why the maiden thinks it won't work out. In the end, the young man will get the most valuable thing of all, Ursha. He strokes her hair gently. The maiden opens her mouth, which crawled down on its own from the surprise she felt. Nothing good will come of His Holiness getting it. It can't be weird. Blondie can get a lot of things even being around the Duke's daughter. Without even asking, the young lady herself knew the answer. If Azriel can make such a woman his own, it's impossible to refuse. The girl doesn't consider herself to be any kind of thing, so if she becomes the young man's, he will be hers alone. Adjusting the brooch on his chest, the man nods. If the beloved wants it so badly, then that's fine. His Holiness had something else important to tell, so gathering his thoughts, he begins. Walking over to the closet, the young man pulls out a letter from one of the drawers, but not in the usual wrapping, but in black paper. The will of the past head of the church is in there, so of course the beauty is curious about what it says and what it's about. The heroine nods. She'll keep quiet about anything she hears here no matter what she finds out. Perhaps the young lady has already guessed its contents, but still promises to keep quiet about everything. Noticing the confusion and confidence on the girl's face, the guy says that the content is a bit about herself. Most of the wills of the heads of the church expressed hope for the peace and stability of magic, but the last one just didn't publish it. There was only the fact that the past head of the church had kissed the girl's forehead and given a blessing, but that was it. Except for what had happened, the lady hadn't had any more one-on-one encounters with him, so the interest was getting even more intense. Better to hear about it now than being in a dungeon, so the beauty expects to be read the contents. That would apply to the princess, even if the man wanted to lock her in his room for complete safety. Without giving the girl anything to object to, the young man begins. The oracle was wrong. The words that becoming an heiress would bring peace and stability to the maiden were a lie from the start. The lady jumps up from her seat, grabbing with her hands the edge of the tabletop that helped hold her up. It was actually much worse than that. The dizziness was now making itself felt, making it clear that the lie had been exposed. It would be better if the oracle changed overnight and Lurtella was the one the man was talking about. I don't want to believe it. But the blonde man next to her gently removes the beauty's hands from her face, asking her to calm down. The content of the oracle was wrong, but that doesn't mean the existence itself is false. The lie was something else. The maiden shouldn't have been the prince's wife, or she wouldn't have been able to bring peace and tranquility to the empire after all. The girl left her place as the prince's bride and clung to the idea that she had been deceived and the lie would soon be exposed. But perhaps she was the problem. The content of the oracle he received turned out to be a lie that would have to be accepted, even if it was painful and unpleasant. Azriel lowers his head sadly, watching the thrashing of the princess who now saw no real truth in her life. If none of this is true and is a fabrication, then the young lady may be pleased, but you can't tell too much from her. No one ever knew what the man who would bring peace and stability to the world looked like. To ensure peace and stability in the empire, the emperor used a maiden as a handy tool. Snatching away the hand the priest was holding, the lady bounces back. Ursula is convinced to the last that she hasn't been used, and it's not true. Strange that the young lady still thinks so. After everything that had happened, she should have realized long ago that she didn't matter. The little girl was locked up in the palace and forbidden to go outside just to enjoy her childhood. Even if the path the heroine got was not the path she was supposed to take, she was still forced to follow it. The emperor was someone who rigidly demanded to surpass his capabilities, so such a thing could not be considered as anything other than using free power. If it's not true, then the blonde should think again, and maybe even more than once, about what was done to her. The man seems to have misunderstood, because that's what all aristocrats are like. Even if it's the wrong road, most would agree. All that is evident is that the king never demanded something that a beautiful woman could not do. Frowning his eyebrows, the young man tries to understand why the princess is defending the emperor who used her. Sighing heavily, The lady corrects herself again, because she meant something completely different. The heroine has always had the ability to accomplish all the tasks set before her. Strong self-confidence literally covered his eyes with a shroud that got in the way. Turning toward the window, the lady offers to come closer to look at something together. The clock tower was something that was noticeable from several kilometers away because of its size. It was Pantria who ordered it to be built and everything designed. It is not a luxury, so the young man is not at all sure that it was made for a good cause. Aristocrats don't know, but for ordinary people it's a luxury item. Subjects don't have a watch, so they look at the sun to make an appointment. Maiden built right down the middle of the city. Turning back, the lady smiles because she always wanted to help ordinary people. When the tower was being built, the girl thought only that it was being built because she wanted it to be built, not because anyone else wanted it to be built. Everyone was against building it because it's a luxury, then why build it in the center of the capital? When the lady wanted it, everyone closed their mouths. Everything the princess did had a plan, so she wasn't considered useless. Everyone who disagreed agreed. All this meant that Ursha had created her own place by literally forging ahead. At first, the princess really thought that she would be used as a pawn of the emperor who would take advantage of this, but it turned out not to be the case. When Beauty built the tower, she of course had a clear plan that no one could surpass. When the tower became a local landmark, revenues rose and tourism increased, so it paid off. The emperor and crown prince turned their backs on the girl when the prophecy changed, but she had learned too much. The couple would never realize just how much the position of crown princess had given the maiden, even if it was now a thing of the past. Rising from his seat, the priest grins. He thought that for someone like Pantria, power wasn't that important. The power itself was, of course, of no importance, but the sweet flavor from it was that all-important element. Wiping the crumbs from his mouth, the young man hums again. For someone who talks about power, the damsel is too disinterested. The girl looks like this, but to those who didn't cross a certain line, she was the magnanimous empress of the future. That's what everyone wanted.